Would we use it for violent criminals, our own violent criminals?
I call them homegrown criminals.
Yes.
I mean, the
homegrowns.
The ones that grew up and something went wrong and they hit people over the head with a baseball bat. We have, and push people into subways just before the train gets there, like you see happening sometimes. We are looking into it and we want to do it. I would love to do that.
I'm here in the Leon County Courthouse where we just got done with the first appearance of Juan Carlos Lopez Gomez, who was detained Wednesday in Florida, and he had charges of entering the state as an unauthorized immigrant. However, he is an American citizen. His mother came to the courthouse, showed his birth certificate and his social security number card, and that still wasn't enough to get him released. The judge just said that she was sorry, and the attorney working for the state said that because he had an ICE hold, he couldn't be released, even if the court didn't find probable cause for his arrest.
This is Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours. Friday, April 18th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. The story continues. I mean, it just day by day, this gets more and more intense and more real for those that choose to, I guess, care about how obviously important this story is, regardless of the partisan angles to it. But some points to start in general I thought were interesting that, it's from what we do on this platform in general, myself in particular, as I've said many times over the years, I will continue to talk about what I think is most important. And it's never just one thing. Today, it's pretty centrally focused, but it tends to be a lot of things. We got criticized of over-focusing on COVID. Clearly, that turned out to be obviously correct to this very day. Still, to this day, get criticized of over-focusing on Israel as the genocides continue to cascade across the world. What I find interesting is, I tend to let my gut guide what I think in that moment is the most important thing. And I've been wrong or been offbeat more than once, like everybody has. But right now, as I've said before, not because I thought it was what people expected or what I thought was going to become the story, but in my opinion, weeks ago, I said this right here, well, before it became as real as it is now, was the most important thing happening for Americans. I could obviously be wrong. Maybe you simply disagree with that. But I wanted to stress this to start, that I will continue to do what I think is most important or cover what's most important. But that's regardless of whether that's what's even the most popular, even within our independent media circles. And I think that's important to recognize is that, like, let's just say this becomes something that literally everybody disagrees with me on, including everybody in our audience. I will still continue to cover what I think is accurate and what I think is most important, not because it's vindicated by the support of the community or in the people that watch the show or because what's more popular, but because I believe it's right. To a fault, I will err on that, even if it's getting less attention or because people don't want to donate anymore. I will still do what I think is right. And the reason I'm stressing that is because it's important to recognize that so often in this platform, we have been so far ahead of something like this that we get negative attention for it, even from people in our community, until later it comes back around. And even half the time that doesn't get recognized because it was so far ahead. And that's not really what's happening here. Everyone sees this, in my opinion. Like, the majority of people are discussing it for one reason or another. I'm just trying to really reiterate an important point, which is that what this platform is about is not about trying to find out what is going to get us the most attention or the most shares or even the combination of that with what's also most important. It's simply alone, completely on its own, what is the most important story that is the most accurate, that is the most, that it is objective, nonpartisan, and with the most facts. That's where I think we are with this story in general around just the idea of the constitutional issue around this. That this is not about whether there's a nuance to it or the right or the left or whether this is clearly right and wrong. This is about whether or not you support the constitutional reality or not. Just like the free speech story. Of course, there's 100 people on every side trying to throw in arguments that get you to try to, that gets you to stop paying attention to the principle. and start going, oh, well, well, there's just so many. We can't just do due process for everybody. Yeah, you can, though, because that's the reality. There's no other conversation. Either you are part of the constitutional conversation and you believe in the constitutional reality, or you don't within a state of society. And that's where we are. That is the reality. And so there are people out there who are desperately trying to get you to think that we shouldn't care in this case or for that person or with this circumstance. And that's, stupidity, ignorance, deceptiveness, a desire to destroy this country. Well, you could pick, but I think it's monumentally important, absolutely monumentally important, that we continue to highlight what this is, regardless of whether the person is an illegal alien, regardless of whether the person is a terrorist, regardless of whether the person is a completely innocent American citizen who's being called all of those things. The principle is the same. Now, also to recognize what David Icke recently pointed out that I've been saying as well for quite a while, which is that, it looks like I'm a lefty again. Funny how 30 seconds ago I was the Nazi Republican maniac, and now I'm the lefty snowflake who's being swayed by all the Democrats online, or none of those things. Or my principled stance around the Constitution stays the same, and the maniac partisan narrative swirls around and convinces different groupings of different sides to see it a different way based on the narrative of the day. The I support the current thing crowd that is left and right, the woke left and the woke right, the bro flakes and the snowflakes, and all of that overwhelm this conversation that I'm increasingly seeing as less and less, if not even remotely close to the majority. I really do believe that. But I wanted to make sure I said that to start today. But we're going to go over this stuff again today not redundant information, new things. A Trump supporter who was detained by ICE. Not that should be any more relevant because he's a Trump supporter, but interesting to see how this is swinging back around. Like anybody nonpartisan objective would have told you, it always does and will come back to bite you because you support it. The reality of just going after anybody that you don't like, even though the Constitution says otherwise, because they're just bad, or I was told they're bad, or whatever else the narrative is. But also an American citizen who we'll get to in this show. There has been a resolution in that regard, but recognizing that an American citizen with an American identification was taken by ICE, and the judge sees the information and still hands tied, apparently. Now, is that because she's afraid of the persecution happening around this conversation, even though she knows she has the right to do something about that? Or is that because of political leaning? It's hard to say. It's important to get into, and we'll cover that today to talk about. But we're also going to discuss the fifth time that Donald Trump has now floated the idea that American citizens could be sent to foreign prisons with no due process. And of course, the larger ongoing conversation around how we have people like Garcia or plenty of others who are just flat out being lied about. I'll go over the court documents, the actual literal documents everyone online seems to want to point at or highlight screenshots of, but not really understand. Realize how blatantly you're being misled about the Supreme Court 9-0 ruling. Either of them, by the way, both of them clearly in the side of what they're doing is wrong, just nuanced about how it should be accomplished, not the way they're framing it, or that Garcia is a terrorist, MS-13, gang leader, human trafficker, all of which are patently false, or at the very least, the only things they claim they're pointing to are clearly show that's not the case, and there's no other evidence to suggest that, and if he is those things, there's nothing to back that up. And the argument is the evidence we have in front of us that they're pointing to does not say what they keep claiming it does. Now, you might have picked up on the reality. I mean, this conversation, not because of the actual principled idea of the constitutional rights around it or immigration in general. I've seen the immigration conversation largely as a very manipulative wedge issue that there's still relevance, obviously. But it's frustrating that we're in a position now where we have to continue to reiterate these things that should be fundamental understandings for Americans, foundational realities that we don't quibble or waver on, that we go absolute, like absolute free speech, inherent, God-given, shall not be infringed rights. Not if they say this, or if they wear a red hat, or if they were at January 6th, or whatever other narrative you want to spin on top. That it's important that we truly put aside all of this partisan games and recognize how clear this conversation truly is and where this is leading us as a country. Now, there was one other point I just lost, but I'm going to go into it so I don't drag this out any further. But I want to get into this in general today and go through the new information, the new parts of this that I think are very, very, it changes the conversation quite a bit. And of course, the main part that we titled in regard to a teen that has been actually sent to El Salvador. A teen that the ICE picked up somebody they were going for, publicly said out loud, no, that's not the guy, but take him anyway. That kid's in El Salvador. The place where nobody seems to come back from, even those that are wrongly sent, like him or Garcia or anybody else we're talking about. It's a very chilling conversation for those of us that are speaking out against a very alarmingly lawless government when they're telling you American citizens might be next. If they are saying illegal things about Israel, well, let's hope it doesn't get that far. Let's hope we have enough constitution, and I mean that in the sense of like gumption in this country, to do the right thing out there, listening or not. Just understanding that in your heart this is wrong, whether or not the person's got a brown face or whether or not he is actually part of MS-13. The reality is the same, that due process applies, and they're violating this. And the Supreme Court rules that, and they do it anyway. We'll go through it again today. I wanted to start with some important points. I'm not going to go into Israel in general, even though let's not forget that is the reason that they're stating this is all happening. Not my opinion, not some theory. What they're telling you this is about. Oh, that's what I was going to say. Before, let me pull this back real quick. I just want to say that I'm sure in general that people out there, just even like the time I'm taking away from this stuff, this has gotten to me quite a bit. And I don't mean in the sense that it's like I'm like emotionally losing my cool or anything, but like it's weighing on me more than sadly to say, even more so than the ongoing genocide. And that's not to say one's more important or more than the other. In my opinion, the ongoing genocide of human beings is the absolute most important thing happening on the planet. But the point is that this has somehow gotten to me in a way that is, momentarily makes you lose faith in humanity. And I think I'm always checking myself to go, I don't believe that's the real picture. I don't believe that most people out there watching these shows I don't think they actually believe or are of the mind that they're presenting as the majority. I don't believe that. I could be wrong, but I see more than enough people out there that make me see that even the people they point to don't really have the opinion they claim they do, but you fall into it. And day by day, you see these things. And it's not that I think that everybody falls for this. I think far too many do, but it's the problem that you see all of the government, even the left, not doing anything about it. Nothing to say that they're better or worse. The point is that at a point when they're the adversarial side, right, against the power structure, as it were, even though they're all the same thing in my mind, having the opportunity to go after him like they tell us they would. Where are they right now? Yeah, they're saying things. They're screaming about things about constitutional right, but they're not really doing anything. Where's Congress impeaching somebody for doing such a radical change or ignoring Supreme Court rulings? Maybe we'll get there. I'm going to touch on that today and what that really means for a republic. Does that even exist anymore? With a lot of reasons we're seeing that's not meant to be hyperbolic. There's a lot of very obvious principled legal realities that are showing us that, and then we've been saying it for a long time, that we don't live in the place we think we do. And so it's hard for me to have hope in the reality that I think things are getting better. And I know that they are in a lot of ways. And I think that's why this is happening. But it's hard not to lose yourself in that darker before the dawn kind of reality. Sure is dark, right? And so I'm just letting you know that it's not just you out there. This weighs on me, and it makes me, I have a hard time kind of reconciling how anybody can be like that, how we can exist in a world where people are just smugly disregarding, or acknowledging, or rather proliferating absolute fabrications that in many cases I can prove that they know are lies and are doing anyway because they hate people that are brown, or because it's all about our agenda, or on the other side, because they hate people in red hats, or because you're saying the wrong pronouns. It's the same dumb thing in the same direction. We just got to start paying attention to that. But it does weigh on me because so many people out there are yelling things that just make me sick. And even if it's bots, which I think a lot of it is, I guess the long form point is just saying that I understand. I'm right there with you. And this is a difficult situation in a lot of different ways. Not least of which is because this stuff is still happening. And this is even on my show today, it's consuming the conversation. I do think it is, from an American perspective, paramount right now. But this, in case you missed it, a few points not to overlap or not to miss in all of it. Mohammed Shihada, on top of the story we already covered about the Gaza medics where they murdered them. It was proven that they did so, Israel, and then buried them to try to cover it up, and then killed the people that tried to come to find it. And it still came out. And the New York Times still wrote about it. Autopsies of Gaza medics killed by Israeli troops show some were shot in the head. Like, more has come out about this, where this is a straight up provable, forensically investigated execution of medics. There's not even they floated the flimsy argument that, just they were Hamas. that was very quickly broken down to be utterly false, even by people in Israel. Half the people they pointed to, they said were there, were proven not to even been there. But that's what Israel does because they've expected people just to go along with it. So Muhammad writes, the autopsies prove that Israel executed the paramedics with direct gunshots to the head. Even if you want to claim they're Hamas, isn't this supposed to be the only democracy in the Middle East? Are they supposed to have some kind of Nope, not here. I mean, that was funny is we don't even pretend like there's some kind of process here. Are we to believe that Israel would come up on a Hamas member surrendering and they would take them back in prison? No, they would murder them. And that is a crime. See, it's the same kind of thing we're talking about in the world today, where you go, well, they're illegal. That doesn't change the right that they have rights. And there's laws that in place. In this case, the same idea I guarantee people in right and probably the left. If you said they had a position where they came up on Hamas members and they surrendered and they murdered them, I bet you nobody would quibble about that. But despite that being a massive international war crime because they were supposed to be POWs. But you think our government does? Then no, our government's the same. They don't care. I'm just trying to make a simple point that it matters, guys. It matters whether or not we care about these things, whether we express that. Rampant lawlessness is taking over the world right now. Murdered these people, burying them in a mass grave, and then blatantly lying about it, knowing we all see it. Israel shot each of them multiple times at point-blank range, according to autopsies, despite wearing clear uniforms and driving ambulances. But yeah, that'll fall by the wayside. Here's the New York Times article about it. That's the government. That's the people that they're helping. Now, this is just to set the tone, set the table, which a lot of the opening parts will today. The number one cause of child deaths on the planet right now is Israel. Just really take a second to reflect on what that means. Whether, think about, whatever else we're thinking about as a terrible child. The number one cause of death for children is Israel right now. I just can't even believe that can be the reality, and we don't understand that people would still push back on this. But we live in a situation where there's some pretty bad people around, and I tend to think they've taken control of a lot. Our apathy has allowed that to happen. And I don't mean that by any kind of a slight. I mean, we've been engineered this way for quite a long time. Our shows and our fast food and the chemicals being pumped in our air and our food and our shots and everything have caused us to be diminished, to say it lightly. The point is, we can do something about that. I'm going to include an interview with Robert that I had yesterday that I played today, or actually it was 2 days ago. Israel's ongoing genocides with the plural and the malicious Greater Israel Project. It was kind of just getting caught up with Robert again. He's going to start to get back to writing some articles where I'm starting to get some of that moving again, but just doing it slowly because I don't want to just get right back into what we're doing and have more lawsuits fall on top of me. But the bottom line is it's important not to lose sight of what's going on there. Very obvious. They're not even hiding what's happening. Your government is facilitating a massive globalist takeover of the entire Middle East. But let's keep listening to Alex Jones that tells you about Chi-Coms or points to people in Europe or whatever else they want you to keep deflecting to as the obvious thing happens obviously every day. Speaking of the idiots in partisanship, I want to point this out, how this cat turd highlights what we were just discussing, by the way, which is, I might as well just grab it since we just did the show. The mRNA self-amplifying shot. Fast tracks the shot, right? This is the one we just discussed on April 14th. One of the few people were talking about that. I think Shannon Joy was talking about it as well. FDA fast tracks bird flu self-amplifying mRNA shot. No one wants to talk about that in the partisanship, but even Catturd will say, hell no, and then never talk about it again. And I simply said, pretty on brand if you're honest, of course, seeing as how Stargate rolled out as an mRNA platform, but no, the thing they're doing again, I'm outraged about. Or not really. That's the kind of feigned no, and then nothing, right? So, and evidence of that, that's the one right there. Evidence of that is a few days later, he writes this, right? So Stargate platform, mRNA cancer platform, I mean, 1,000 different things they've challenged directly, MMR shots, mRNA platforms, I mean, whatever else. Fast tracking a new one. And then on the 16th, 2 days later, we're winning, be happy. Of course, right? Just your daily blue pill. Go back to sleep, guys. We're doing great. It's insane. And I said, yeah, I'll see. I'm fine. I was going to do like the burning house one, but that's played out. Hashtag winning. I mean, how are you going to go from the absolute opposite of what I want? Hell no, but we're winning. I mean, you at least water that down a bit. No, it's because their job is to convince you that everything's fine. Just go back to sleep, guys. Get your McDonald's. Listen to the government. Oh, excuse me, the rebels. I didn't mean the government. I meant the rebels find the deep state, okay? Not the government that's in control, because that would be weird. And of course, they're doing all the important stuff, like going after Tesla terrorists. Like, let's be real about this, guys. There's been about one example of the one. That's why they always point to the same one, which was a big deal. Just because it was vandalism and arson, you can get prison time for that. Tesla showroom, a lot of money. No, that is something. If you think that doesn't matter, then you're ridiculous in the same other way, right? That matters no matter whether it's Elon's or Tesla's or whatever else. That's a lot of damage. The point is, they dealt with that. They caught somebody. All the rest that I've seen have been minor stuff, but they're going after these people like they're, like the terrorists that your government supports, almost like that, or I shouldn't say it like that, since they don't actually go after them unless they, taking it back. Because once they use them like they do them, then they do go after them like Osama bin Laden or Saddam Hussein, but getting complicated. The point is, this is what they seem to care about. Another domestic terrorist who targeted Tesla is off the streets. Targeted Tesla. How does that work? Did they scratch a car? Did they go after the dealership? Did they threaten somebody? Most of these are pretty benign cases, and they're facing 40 years in prison. You're threatening to deport American citizens. You're giving people no due process. You're going after people that scratch Teslas. Where's the Epstein list? Where's the JFK files? Where's all the people you claimed you would arrest? Where are any of the arrests? Where are the tribunals? Where's Bill Gates? Where's Fauci? Where are all the people? Everyone on their side is screaming about that right now, at least, but not cat turd, not the huge people at the top, but the 99% of the conservative movement behind them. Look online, everywhere, under things like this, under Pam Bondi's tweet going, Bondi, what are you doing? The point is, as Solari Report writes, no investigations or prosecutions of the people who stole $21 trillion either. What about that? But her point has been always they'll never go after that, which shows you this has always been a lie. Protection of people who stole our privacy law protected data to increase the value of their private AI companies, like XAI and OpenAI, which they're all doing. It's been admitted to. Massive privacy issues, but the constitutionalists don't seem to care about that. And I'm only saying that to make a point. I am of the mind that most of them in the mass of the conservative movement do care, do see it. They're just not being acknowledged. My point is the ones pretending to be that at the top don't. How is this the best investment of our tax dollars? By the way, am I crazy, or does she look like she's belongs to be like a Joker? She looks like she's like something about her face gives me like a Joker look, like from Batman. But the point, guys, is this is not what we should care about. Right? I mean, it's not unimportant. Yes, go after criminals, obviously. But funny how you're not going after all the illegal aliens that they want to give a pass to in all of the hotels and the farming, but going after people that are in fact legally in this country who just say the wrong things. It's a shell game. It is a bait and switch at this point. Or things like this that we're getting. I think this is designed to get you to, and this is all about just kind of setting the table for a larger conversation today. There right now is an effort in the partisanship to get you looking in a lot of different directions. My opinion, but decide for yourself. I thought this was just lazy. This person, by the way, just disgusts me for a lot of reasons. But she says, China just called the American people peasants. It's time to cancel all Chinese student visas and ship them back to planes. Okay, multiple things happening here, in my opinion. One, China's the one. Everyone look at China, like Loomer and all the rest. They're desperately trying to wave their hands and look over here. It's China doing everything. And I would be just as skeptical of China as anybody else. But show me, what are we talking about? Give me the actual tangible evidence, not the partisan narratives versus the actual evidence of Israel being infiltrated in damn near everything we're doing every day. And then they praise it. They high five with it. It's everywhere in your face, but you're not supposed to talk about that. You're racist. Where's that? Anywhere over here. Am I getting thrown in jail for criticizing China? But that's the first part. Look at China. Second part is, oh my gosh, it's visas too. Go after visas. Get them deported. Hey, Palantir. Yeah, that's part of this. We're going to get to in a second. Track them all down for us, because bad guys, don't worry about privacy rights. Don't worry about constitutional rights. We'll get back in that. We'll get back to the good spot in a minute. Just go to sleep. Trust the plan. So weird how these seem to converge. The point is, it's not about China at all, in my opinion. It's about getting you to look away from Israel and continuing the deportation agenda, which is entwined with a lot of things, intertwined with a million different agendas here. Whether it's the biometric conversation, whether it's the immigration in general, whether it's the basically destruction of our rights and our Constitution. But here's my point. This was on the 15th. This is on April 8th. You probably saw this. You probably even know this, but I just think it's so blatant what they're doing. Beijing calls Vance ignorant over his Chinese peasants remark. So you'd think, people that don't pay attention to the broader stuff and only look to people like their gospel, their ideologues, right? You're going to read her post and go, China called us peasants. We hate China. Report them all. That's what the dumb people are going to say that follow her. Except the problem is that Vance is the one that started it by calling them peasants. And they respond by doing, and this is right here, if you care about the back and forth, such a minor point. The point is that he said that first, they responded. And so if you're going to call them out for calling them peasants, then how about you make it clear that that the U.S. government called Chinese people peasants first? Now, this is all, in my opinion, manufactured to get you to go China bad. Look at China. But they are, and that people like this are mindless followers. But of course, she has almost 1 million followers or over 1 million followers now. Think about that, guys. Isn't that a weird way to represent the story? Deport them ASAP because they responded in the same way that you just called them? Yes, it's a small point, but think about how nefarious all of this is, how constant all this is. And that's a tiny point. It's everywhere you look right now. Deliberate misrepresentation in the partisanship, left and right. Here's an example. Shadow of Ezra says, Dan Caldwell, you might have heard already, a top advisor to Defense Chief Pete Hegseth, was escorted out of the Pentagon after being named in the Department of Defense leaks investigation. So you're hearing a lot about this, about he's the secret Democrat, and he's the one that's been undermining everything because he secretly all these narratives and allegations and floated ideas with nothing to much back it up from the typical mainstream alternative media types. Caldwell didn't toe the usual line on foreign policy. Now, I'm not defending good, bad, left. It's not about that for me. I question every person in government or anybody in power, or really anybody. Completely. Everything. Question everything. Consider all possibilities is the only way to live in a world, especially that's trying to deceive you all the time, or just one that exists. But he openly challenged the Washington consensus on Israel, saying the U.S. hasn't had the honest conversation on the topic in over 2 decades. Okay. He's also opposed dragging America into war with Iran, famously stating that when Israel is attacked, it's Israel, not America, under fire, right? Tucker Carlson called Caldwell a man of genuine integrity, high intelligence, principle. Still true. Now, whether there's other narratives going on about what's happening here, you can decide for yourself. My point is that this is what's happening in regard to what he said, what you can prove. But you get stuff like this. Loomer says, just in, even though this was well after it, right? Breaking, something everyone's talked about. Dan Caldwell, one of the top advisors for U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, was escorted out of the Pentagon after being identified during investigation into leaks. You recall, Dan was listed in the point of contact. He's since locked his account. So this is, you can read more if you want. This is the cascading narrative about this guy being the enemy, right? Why is that? I'm sure you could piece that together. Laura is a flaming Zionist who is actively going after anybody who tries to undermine the Israel first agenda of the United States. So just recognize another person that spoke up and said, hey, maybe we shouldn't do whatever Israel says. You're out of here. Get out of here. Make it. And then she goes after him as some kind of insider manipulator, as opposed to somebody who's just leaking in a way that arguably is the way it's meant to go, which is look at all the crimes they're committing. But not today, right? There's no whistleblower protection in this country, much as they love to pretend those things exist. Look at everyone that's had a real effect. They're all been put in prison or killed or shot or disappeared. Now, last point on this, I just wanted to highlight this. Red points something out that I've been calling out a lot. He said, okay, so questionable past Barbie over here, and one of Elon Musk's pets has 249,000 posts since her account was created. This is the Insurrection Barbie account. Now, that's pretty impressive to post every 3 minutes. And to an impressive level, 436 posts per day since her account creation on August 2022. I don't know about you, but that's some dedication right there. Wink, wink. I've talked about this before, how it works, and the use of automation bots and specific spam tools to churn every post every second if you wanted. Barbie's account is nothing more than a narrative farmer. Now, it's his opinion, but you can do the math for yourself. And apparently it gets even worse. As she points out down here, it was actually, basically 429,000 posts over 990 days equals an average of 434 posts a day. There's one other in here that was, this right here, the Parseval, which you're familiar with. Somebody also who was very pro-Elon on Twitter until suddenly recognized they were all lying to him. At 12 hours a day on the platform, it would be around every 1.5 minutes, right? So the argument's either that you're talking about a 24-hour account, but that's obviously not a real person or a team who's posting that much, or if you did the reality and argued maybe it was a person, that would be 12 hours a day at most, at every 1.5 minutes. The point is obvious. That's not a real person. So either this is a real person who just chooses to use a bot, which is supposed to be against the rules on this platform, just like Elon does, by the way, or, you could fill in the gaps with whatever you think is possible. The point is, guys, this is either they're a blank bot or somebody who is using bots. Funny how all the people at the highest level of this team seem to be doing the same things. We're being gaslit. AstroTurf. That's what this is. I think it's very obvious. So the reason I'm including that today is because look at what's going on. Look at the false conversation about what we're going to get into around Trump sending Americans to foreign prisons or undermining our constitutional rights, things that are supposed to be foundationally important to the team currently in charge. That's a team for a reason. Because the reality is Americans should understand that there is no team around all of this. But the people that want to believe they're on that team, you're supposed to tell yourselves that constitutional is that matters more than anything. And now you've been put to the test. I think most of you are out there passing, quite frankly, but I think the problem is that too many are falling for the screamers like that. Now, one overlapping point before we get into it in earnest. Marco Rubio put this out. The American people don't need an obscure agency to, quote, protect them from speech by silencing, censoring, or banning them. Today, we're putting an end to that. Oh, are you? Sure doesn't seem that way, seeing as how you just take it a step further. You're just kicking them out of the country now. And Twitter doesn't slow down even remotely. They're censoring things all over the place for the ADL. It's not a secret. People just don't want to talk about it. You see, the State Department will no longer be spending taxpayer dollars to censor Americans. Oh, they'll just use the black budget money or, whatever else. This is just narrative, guys. Let's realize how embarrassing it is for somebody who is leading a censorship campaign on Americans for anti-Semitism, acting like they're even remotely trying to change. All they're doing is shifting gears, direction into something different. We're going away from the woke agenda and into the Israel anti-Semitism. It's the same thing. The outcome is the same. If you're paying attention, of course, Ben Shapiro hosts this complete war criminal maniac because he's a complete shill for the government. AIPAC tracker says BS detected. Rubio supports AIPAC's efforts to censor free speech. There's no question about that. Here, Glenn Greenwald responds to that same post and says, how do these people have the audacity to masquerade as free speech champions when they've spent the 3 months devoting massive resources to deporting people legally? That's so important. Legally in the United States for the crime of criticizing Israel, then forcing colleges to expand the hate speech codes to protect Israel. Khalil and 10 plus others that we can prove that went to El Salvador were here legally. That does include people who went through the legal process seeking asylum or seeking even real citizenship. And in the midst of that process, were snatched and sent to El Salvador. No criminal record, here legally or in the process of seeking such, and they have a wrong tattoo. That's literally, and they've admitted this, that's literally all we're talking about. In some cases we can prove. I'm going to go over specifics that New York Times is able to get a hold of, showing you that the vast majority of these people are innocent. Some of them might have been here legally. The ones we can prove, I could prove to you that many of them were here legally. That should be enough for anybody who cares about the Constitution. And here's a little meme that was put out by Patrick, I think is perfect. Little Marco in the Temple of AIPAC. It shows him dressed like Indiana Jones, which part of me hates because he doesn't deserve that. But woke right censorship in one hand and woke left censorship on the other. And he's carefully putting one in place of the other, right? That's what's happening right now. And Patrick says the woke right is real. And it's even more insidious than the woke left because it's using U.S. state power to crush dissent against the policies and actions of a foreign government, Israel. The sad thing is people that just can't think past their own personal opinion hear that and they go, there's no woke, right? Because all they think is woke, pronouns and rainbow flags. And that's all they can think because that's how simple their mind is about this. It's about what is accomplished through those tactics, right? So if it's censorship, identity politics, right? Cancel culture. It's all the same stuff for a different narrative. Fill in the blank with anti-Semitism, Israel, Zionism. It's exactly the same thing. Or plenty of others, in some cases, even the same exact things. Nobody wants to call it out. Now, one other point that overlaps with Palantir, which I think you need to see before we get into the rest of the conversation about the constitutional crisis in this country. And what's sad about that, by the way, is just even using that term. So much of this conversation has been so wildly, because Democrats, and this is so simple. It is like the most lazy example of basic reverse psychology. So we come out and we go, and whether anybody's even talked about it, this is unconstitutional because here's I'm so frustrated about this. The effing Constitution is right there, okay? Here's what's happening. Here's the law. How are we confused about this? Then you get a Democrat that comes out, an opportunist, I would argue, who just sees how obvious it is and goes, well, I can win some points, and goes, that's that thing. And they go, see, Ryan just said what the Democrat said. Okay. In fact, I was saying this weeks ago before any of them said this. The point is, how does that make a difference? Just because a Democrat says it, therefore it's false? You can't be that stupid. You can't be that simple in this conversation. Consider it. Maybe it's wrong because it's wrong. If that's the case, then prove that. It's not wrong because the New York Times covered it or because Van Hollen went to go see the guy. I called this out before he even went. I said, he's probably an opportunist. So I just want to set that out there. It's insane to me that we're in this conversation where they just go, well, you just listening to Democrats online. Did you even look, or are you just listening to Republicans online? It's the same stupid conversation. I'm doing neither of those things. I'm looking for source material, as you should too. That's the only way you can do this. Now, here are a couple important points to how this is going. Overlapping with Israel, which I don't even know how you can miss today. But Benny Johnson, and this does kind of overlap with the first part, right? The America First partisan lie. He says, breaking, is it NVIDIA, I think, or NVIDIA, whatever. I think I'm just going to say NVIDIA, which is the supercomputer chip manufacturer, is to manufacture American-made AI supercomputers in the United States for the first time. America first, he says. Well, is it? It's very easy to just fall into the trap of just going, whatever Betty says has got to be the truth, even though he doesn't seem to be very bright, in my opinion. The point is, NVIDIA has a pretty strong Israel connection, but that's not enough to go, that doesn't count, it doesn't matter. They, as they'd say, significant connection to Israel. But here's what matters to me. NVIDIA is developing and building Israel one of the world's most powerful generative AI cloud supercomputers. NVIDIA has invested in the Israeli startup ecosystem. Oh, you mean like that's the Unit 8200 Israeli intelligence infiltration vehicle that they've proudly discussed and have written articles about? Yes. Okay, so they're just like SoftBank, by the way, that also runs the Stargate program. They've basically financed the Israeli intelligence infiltration startup vehicle. That's the startup conversation we have more than once, where they put agents or people that are, quote, ex-agents to go out and create companies that they then run for the interest of Israeli intelligence. And that's not my opinion. They've written articles about saying that's what they're doing. So if you have now another entity from the AI side of this who's also in that boat, we have to start paying attention to these overlaps. And it says the company's commitment to Israel is evident in its ongoing investments and support for its employees, including those in Gaza and the West Bank. So not only that, it's a company that is, as of right now, still investing in what they're doing in Gaza and the West Bank. You know, the ongoing genocide. If you want a company to boycott, it'd be something like that. And Zachary Foster also points out, if you work for NVIDIA, your employer will actually not, despite them claiming to match donations to basically anything, like a lot of companies do, turns out they wrote down, except for these ones, right? Will not match your donations to people like the victims of Israel and the starvation of Gaza. However, if you work for NVIDIA, they'll actually match your donation to the illegal settler movement in Israel. So it just shows you what, in that none of that is proof that they're somehow not on your side or America First. The one that matters to me is that you have a company that's strongly invested in what is the infiltration, that is the Israeli startup Unit 8200 intelligence vehicle, and their Israel One supercomputer. Now, are we wondering at all whether that is what this will be? That they're simply now working on this massive supercomputer program? Why would they start a new one for the United States when they're working together? And SoftBank is the financial side leading the entire thing. You must be smarter than this. But of course, he says America First. Everything else is Democrat, I guess, right? You must listen to CNN or whatever the excuse would be to make you ignore the obvious real-time thing that's happening in front of you. But people like Benny are too caught up in winning, apparently, whatever that looks like to you. Now, here's another example, Mint Press News. New investigation. Google's $32 billion purchase of Wiz hands its global data security to an Israeli firm founded and staffed by ex-military cyber spies from, surprise, surprise, IDF's Unit 8200. So either we're watching a massive kind of conglomerate, like power grab by the group that I think has always been infiltrating all of this stuff, or, I mean, I just don't know how else to frame this. At rapid scale, we are watching these things kind of get consolidated in the hands of one clear power structure. Now, this is going to overlap with the deportations. First, I just want you to see I'll include the articles we've done. The shows we've done, Israel Global Cybersecurity Infiltration. We do a real focus on this exact thing about the infiltration specifically of cybersecurity. The one we talk about, the same overlap, but more in depth, but in light of the pager attack that happened in Lebanon, really thinking about what that means, that you can have pagers that 5 to 10 years are circulating your country. They just decide to execute, explode, and you never even knew they were there. I'm willing to bet you that's somewhere like the Samson option overlap, probably everywhere in the world. I don't know why they wouldn't have done that based on what they say everywhere else. But You can look into it for yourself. Or the article that Whitney wrote for TLAV back in 2023, The Prince and the Spy, overlapping Eric Prince with an Israeli spy, and the conversation about how they use him to kind of work their way into the U.S. market. Or the fact that, as they've written down in their own articles, as I said before, I think I just passed it. Yes, it says, since 2012, cyber-related and intelligence projects that were previously carried out in-house in the Israeli military and Israel's main intelligence arms are transferred to companies that in some cases were built for that exact purpose. That's pretty specific. In some cases, managers of development projects in Israeli military and intelligence, like Unit 8200 specifically, were encouraged to form their own companies, which then took over the military project. I mean, there's really no way to misunderstand that, guys. This is an intelligence operation. They're building companies in your government. What if it was China doing that? Or your country, I meant. If China was building companies throughout it looks like even the idea of land ownership is too much, which I agree with. China shouldn't be owning, not Chinese entities, by the way. That's a different conversation, legally speaking, but Chinese government owning land in this country shouldn't be okay. So why do we allow Israel's intelligence apparatus to build companies working for they're spying, they're harvesting data. Now it's just becoming the government. You might want to think about what that means. Now, today, one more thing, actually. Express News overlaps this with Israel deploys AI chatbot. So as we're watching this like AI consolidation around the world and with Israel's fingers on every pie that seems to be doing it, they've adapted on top of the Palantir, Lavender, Habsora assassination factory, they called it, from 972 magazine. They now have given them what are called AI chatbots, or called Genie, to the army on the ground. They've expanded their AI murdering system and launched what's called Genie, a battlefield chatbot used by commanders to make real-time decisions, which we already got. I'll include these so you can read them for yourself if you haven't gone over them. In these articles, what they tell you, point blank, from the IDF members on the record, as this is even called, a mass assassination factory, where they tell you they're being pushed to basically take what the AI says at face value without any investigation, and they're just mass murdering people. I'm willing to argue this is a way for them to kind of pretend like nobody made these choices and it was always AI's fault, if it ever came to that. There's plenty of this evidence. So now they're just continuing in that direction. This is with Palantir, and this one's using Chat GPT, or modeled on Chat GPT, integrated with their military networks. It's already active in all command centers. Their deployment builds on platforms like Habsora, and I'll grab that one too for you. That was the first one. Oh, that was the one I just showed you, actually. That's this one here, the Mass Assassination Factory, Lavender. One's basically for buildings, one's for people, and both of them are doing the same thing. So continuing the thing, continuing the agenda. Here is Palantir, January 12th, showing you we're partnering with a genocidal entity. There's CARP, there's Teal, right there. Happy to partner with Israel while they're committing a genocide. That's important. Now, I'll include this for you to watch if you want to watch it again, as Teal, like in the most painful way, stumbles through not answering a question that's basically about why you're letting them kill people with AI. And his argument is, I defer to Israel, because Israel, I'm not going to question their decisions. I defer to Israel. That's what this massive, powerful, elitist oligarch said. Pay attention. It's so obvious what's happening. And of course, weaponized migration and experimentation. We covered this on August 2024, tools for subversion, division, and manufacturing consent. That's where we are. So if you want to see one obvious overlap, now you could argue this is sort of never let a good crisis go to waste, but that isn't always by itself. Half the time, if not more, they manufacture the thing they then take advantage of, right? So in this case, which we've already been telling you was coming, we've already been talking about this. They caught an Israeli entity, an agent, a Mossad agent, or rather somebody working for Mossad outside the border, and everyone dropped that story. We talked about that many times. This has been building. In this case, what is this for? Well, we know about the biometric wall. We know about the Great Reset overlap. We know about the surveillance discussion. We know about the migration overlap, like immigration in this country. Okay, so this has been built and driven, obviously, for larger agendas in the world, in my opinion, but also for now what they're using it for to execute in this country, which is Palantir. Their plan to help ICE deport people. Now, yes, the deportation aspect is clear for some agendas, but it's a means to an end to get us in the technocratic control structure to accept like they did after the Patriot Act conversation or after 9/11, to accept the new scenario, the new security state. Now we're going into the technocratic security state or the overlap with the biosecurity state. All of this is building rationalized on the idea that we have to get rid of this. We told you this was coming, guys. This is one of the things that we were all pointing to, that they would use Palantir to ultimately achieve this end, using it to be facial recognition, biometric scans. We told you this is how this would go when they said mass deportations for the first time. Here we are. It's amazing how many times you can be so far ahead of these kind of things. And, not like we knew for sure, just because that's what logically made sense to us. And how many times you could make those kind of claims and how many times nothing seems to shift in the conversation of average people. JD Vance says this: consider that Joe Biden allowed approximately 20 million illegal aliens into our country. Now, this is a claim that is disputed. I think that's important because, the argument is that ultimately that seems like a ridiculously high number, but let's just take it at face value for the conversation. Because to me, it's an irrelevant point to what he's trying to use it for. So his claim is 20 million people. As always, you should absolutely demand that we verify things like this. They float things like this out and it becomes the talking point. You'll find Fox and OAN and everybody else just blindly stating these things without any verification because they know they can get away with it. But for all we know, it is. It wouldn't surprise me because this has been manufactured, but it does seem ridiculous to me. This placed extraordinary burdens on our country. Our schools, hospitals, housing. Nobody should dispute that. The manufactured immigration crisis from left and right is clearly causing things that we should care about. And essential services were overwhelmed. On top of that, many of these illegal aliens committed violent crimes and facilitated fentanyl, sex trafficking. Okay. There are big, broad, scooping claims there, none of which he's actually verifying, but to some level, there is these things happening. There's also just as many of those things happening by American citizens. But it says the American people elected the Trump administration to solve this problem. Of course, that's the game we play, right? Even though I think we can prove, quite frankly, that your vote never translates to the outcome. And I'm sure, but the point is the same. Plenty of Americans did want him in power. So again, we'll accept that for sake of argument, for sake of conversation. That is the reality. But that's what happened. The president has successfully stopped the inflow of illegal aliens, and now we must deport the people who came here illegally. Okay. Even though what we've already shown you is an endless amount of examples of people that were here legally and had the wrong ideas, people who were deported without due process, that even if they were here illegally, they have the right to go through that process. Anybody. What kills me is that I know right now that's still one of the most debated topics, despite being the easiest to prove. When you have people like Judge Knapp, Napolitano, or was the one I was just thinking of. Just Scalia in general as a justice who ruled in Reno versus Flores, which is literally cited in the Supreme Court case, which I'll show you in a minute. All telling you, because it's not even hard to understand. It is basic. It is a fundamental thing. And yet we're still debating with idiots online about whether illegal aliens have the right to due process. They do. Yes. Move beyond it and start. And the reason is that's the only thing they have to try to make sense of where we are. And honestly, I don't even think honest people are making these arguments. I think it's bots or people that are invested in a certain team sport political agenda or something that doesn't care about the outcome of this country at all. The point, though, we know that's not the full picture, but that's what people who want to go on this and listen to Rubio alone and Trump are pretending is the case. All illegal alien and terrorists. It's not true. In fact, I don't have evidence of any of them being even remotely terrorists. We'll get into that, whether they can just arbitrarily label that. But going forward, it says to say the administration must observe due process is to beg the question. What process is due? What process is due is a function of our resources, the public interest, the status of the accused, the proposed punishment, and so many other factors. Okay? To put it in concrete terms, imposing the death penalty on an American citizen requires more legal process than deporting illegal. Okay, what's your point? So it's a burden. It's too much. It's hard. Okay, so the argument, so this is the same way we do this with the other conversation. In principle is all that matters. So his argument is when this becomes too difficult, we can ignore your rights. Right? Is there some clause in the Constitution that says when there's too many cases, we can ignore due process? No. So let's stop being children about this. I don't care how difficult it is for you. And I'll make more cases more points about this to what Ryan Grimm had a good point about it. I'll point out. But this is where it's like to side with principle, guys. Look, I'm not saying there's not a logical argument to be made about how that would be a problem. But even if that's the case, even if it's impossible, are you able to stand back and go, maybe they drove this into reality for this very purpose so that we would go, yes, suspend our rights like they did in El Salvador and never get them back like they've done in plenty of places the U.S. supports? We just can't be this simple. We can't keep falling into these same excuses or let the people screaming in partisanship drive you into this. And especially, have we even proven that 20 million are actually what's there? Like, this is why these things matter. But even if it's 100 million, it doesn't change the reality of the legal circumstance that they are required to do this. Now, look, if it was as simple as they claim it was, this would be a basic reality. They had people step up. They'd say, here's the evidence. We can prove it. Move on. The reason that they know this will be a quagmire is because they don't have evidence for any of them. Or at the very least, very little, which they've basically admitted to. It says, when the media and the far left, see, that's just the only way they frame this. And this is how they get people who might be on the fence to be, oh, I don't want to be the far left. Oh, I'm not like the media. So I guess I'm on Rubio's side. Simple people fall for stuff like that, but there's a lot of them out there. The reality is this is not about left and right. It's about what the Constitution states and whether your government is ignoring that. To say it's only far left or only left Democrats or anyone that has the opinion this is a problem is either wrong, lying, or swayed by Democrats is a lazy argument that's made to make you ignore the facts in front of you. Consider what they're saying like everybody else, but look for yourself. The crazy thing is we shouldn't have to stress that to people. But it says the media and the left obsess over a MS-13 gang member. Nope. And demand that he be returned to the United States for a third deportation hearing. Nope. They're really saying that he's been they're really saying what they're really saying is they want the vast majority of illegal aliens to stay here permanently. That's not even remotely what people are saying. Some people are saying that, sure, because they're ridiculous. The idea that we should say, that's like the right in the same way in the opposite direction. Right? There's plenty of people on the left, and I think it's designed this way, saying that we shouldn't care. Let illegals vote. They should be. If that's the case, then go through some process to argue that in regard to the legislation. The point is, right now the law is the way it is, and that's to argue that it shouldn't matter is just as dumb as the right saying that narrative. Therefore, we don't have to care about the right on this side or the law or process. Both of them are trying to get you to ignore the thing in the middle for whatever narrative they're saying on the side. And the thing in the middle is what we all have to care about. The constitutional law, the reality of this driving think about how clear that is. Both sides want you to ignore the law for their narrative. How can we miss that? So what they're really saying is they want the vast majority of illegal aliens. Where do you get vast majority and then permanently? Where do those arguments even come from, what you just said? If let's just say we're obsessing over MS-13 members and giving him a third trial. How does that then immediately translate to the vast majority of legal aliens stay permanently? He's trying to scare you. He's trying to shock you into thinking you either agree with me or you want that dumb narrative right there. And I don't see anybody actually saying that outside of, again, the left and right cartoons. And then to go back again, we'll go over this extensively again. The evidence they're using is non-existent. Over and over, they keep citing the same things, and they don't. I'll give you the evidence we have. I'll give you the court documents, and I'll give you what they're pointing to, as I've, by the way, already did well before this became a big hot topic. Which is my point from before. We went over the court rule, the documents, and everything else, showing you what they had about Garcia. They're accusing of MS-13 right when this started, because they made the claim. Melnick had the documents, and he said, "Look, they're lying about that." Here we are. And now we have to go through it for the third time because people are only just discovering this topic. That's what I'm here for. But I just want to show you how frustrating it is that we have to keep going through these documents. And now people online scream that, no, he's a terrorist and a gang member and a human trafficker and he raped grandmothers or whatever Trump said that day, and it just becomes the narrative. And he says, here's a useful test. Ask the people weeping over the lack of due process. Can you even imagine? Like, where is everybody? Like, that's like saying weeping over free speech. Like, it doesn't matter what the narrative is around that. It's the same thing. That is something that's a fundamental inherent right. So all he's saying is ask the people weeping over your constitutional rights what precisely they propose for dealing with Biden's millions of illegal. Well, I think we already established that, bud. Due process. Or is your argument that you're just too tired? It's going to take too long. Your constitutional rights are too much of a burden for the government. Yeah, you're goddamn right they are. That's the point. And it says, and with reasonable resource and administrative judge constraints, does their solution allow us to deport at least a few million He's trying to overwhelm what you think is possible. How about you just start by going along the right path? Start by proving what you're saying, and we can go from there. The argument that you just lay out this grandiose idea that suddenly this is just too difficult, therefore suspend your rights. I mean, again, in principle, there's no difference here. If they're, I mean, as they're literally suggesting that Americans can go and we're going to act like they don't have to prove what they're claiming, I can't believe that most people can be this stupid or this easily deceived. I just can't believe it. And it says, if the answer is no, they've given their game away. They don't want border security. See, and it's these false binaries. Somehow, by arguing you want due process for people the government's accusing of a crime, you don't want border security because either you get it all or you get nothing. You're either with us or you're against us. That's how they play this game. It's false binary, left and right. You either want all of them in here or you want to, it's always something that they play on what they know you want or what they know you hate based on what they've engineered you to feel. They don't want us to deport the people who've come into our country illegally. See, who's he talking about? You talking about the idiots in Congress? That's not the conversation. It's about the American people and what they want. See, what they do in the left-right binary is frame each other as the conversation when they're both cartoons. Most people in the country are pretty much somewhere in the middle. People who want due process do not want you to let everyone come in illegally. That's nowhere in the conversation. I mean, you show me one person that's saying just let everybody in no matter what. I don't even see that in Congress, for crying out loud, even though some of them will probably make that argument. They want to accomplish through fake legal process what they failed to accomplish politically. And there it comes down. Because they want to do this because they want to never have to run for election again. Oh, you mean like what Bukele did in El Salvador? He just turned it into a one-party state, what you guys support, what Israel's trying to do, and what you seem to be driving into reality. The point is, it's just one government using your hatred for each other, guys. It's depressing. Now, Zaid says, JD, if someone's a really bad hombre, you can give them a trial and prove it. Saying you don't have to prove it means you're okay with deporting innocent people. That's the truth. We've already seen that. It's already happened, guys. They've already admitted to having an error. Now, that's whether you make it just about where he went or not, it's the same point. There's clearly more than that, as we'll go through yet again today. But even the one they want to admit to, and now they're walking that back and acting like there was no mistake, even though they all already said that, which is that he wasn't allowed to be removed from this country because there was already an order from the Supreme Court or a judge saying he cannot be sent to El Salvador. And why? Political persecution. They're all trying to make it out to be some gang attacking him. Are we pretending like this, that anybody would say we're going to protect you because you're a gang violence, the gangs that you fought? It's on the record. I've already read it on the show more than once. Political persecution is the government. The same government out there screaming they want the people back. God knows what they're doing with people that are the dissidents over there, which is exactly why Bukele did what he did. Suspend civil liberties, removed all the judges, one-party state, it changes the reality so we can run for a second time, even though it was against the law at the time, sort of like what we're going to see in this country soon. The bottom line is it's about the individual reality, guys. You either deal with it or you don't. To let him give this excuse is it's a nail in the coffin. I mean, really, the way this seems to be going, it might well be the last one. Now, J.D. Vance says, and he goes on to say, treating people like throwaways is no different than the elites in this country did to your family over generations. You're giving them far too much benefit of the doubt. He says, again, you're not even addressing the issue. I'm pretty sure he's addressing the only issue. You want people to jump at the shadows. Biden overwhelmed the system, so all he wants you to do is go to the thing he says is the problem. Well, the problem doesn't change the fundamental legal reality. So here's where this comes important. Here's what Ryan Grimm said. And this is what Vance put forward. Here's the useful test. Ask the people weeping over the lack of due process what precisely they propose for dealing with Biden's millions. Like you're supposed to give him the direction to go in. The reality, the law is already there, right? So Grimm says, is this a joke? You control Congress, which they do, the Republican Party, and the White House. If the laws are insufficient to your task, pass new laws consistent with our Constitution. I'm glad he wrote that. That's our system, guys. That's how this works. You don't just ignore the laws because you're frustrated or because it seems too busy or because it'll take too long. That's a childish argument. That's not a real argument. Even if it's the reality, guys, we have to be this smart. So the problem is he's trying to put it on you. You got any smart ideas? Well, pass a law then. And that's the point about Mayweather versus Madison. If it's repugnant to the Constitution, it's null and void. But you could pass laws that would change that reality that are not repugnant to the Constitution. There's plenty of ways I could see that happening. But they don't want to do that because this is not about a legal reality, guys. It's about enshrining the lack of a legal reality. It's about enshrining the lawless nature of whatever they say is what stands. That's where they are right now. And Glenn adds a few facts, regardless of what side the due process deportation debate that you're on, raised by Vance. He says, 1, the only reason Abrego Garcia case is a controversy is an immigration court blocked his deportation and Trump administration admitted he was mistakenly picked up by ICE. That's very important. Now we're going to get to the case again with a kid who is now already in El Salvador, a teen. I shouldn't say kid, since I think he's 18, so technically an adult, but a teen sent to El Salvador already, even though they admitted he was not even who they were going for. Talk about no due process. I mean, that's insane. Number 2, the Supreme Court ruled 9-0, 6 conservative judges, by the way, the U.S. must facilitate his return. This is what they're I mean, there's so many Trump supporters screaming online that they won this case. It just shows you how easy it is to use that base to scream your narrative and sometimes get momentum. They're flat out lying about that. Or even more alarming, the Stephen Millers of the world don't even know they're wrong, which wouldn't surprise me, but that's pretty insane. Number 3, ordinary deportations, sending someone back to the country of their origin, are very quick and easy. It's done by a deportation court inside the DOJ. But see, that's even different than what Rubio's saying. If they really had this much evidence, it would be actually pretty facilitated. It would be quickly facilitated. They don't want that because they don't have evidence. They're picking people up, as we've already proven, and we're proving more today, with the wrong place, the wrong time, skin color, and in some cases, not even that alone, to be honest. Not even tattoos like this kid we'll talk about next. But then the wrong tattoo, a Michael Jordan tattoo, or even a Bulls hat is enough. Even though the 23 is what actually matters, and there's no 23 for every Bulls gear, but they make the exception. Well, he's a Bulls fan, so he must be part of the gang. I'm not even making that up. That's radically different than sending people to life in prison and a third country where they have nothing to do with, which has been many of them. No legal reality. There's no legal precedent, no law in place to make this happen for anybody, guys. Based on allegations of criminality that are never proven. Due process is raised only with that. The point that the second thing I just said there, though, that's the problem, is that you have people that really want, Trump's in, he's the president, so he can do it if he wants to, is the kind of mindset. That's what they're driving through these, hopefully, bots online. The idea that you want a king, you want a dictator, as long as he's your dictator, it kind of seems like a lot of people feel that way right now. That we have to do that to fight the evil Democrats, and that's how you've been played. You're asking for your own subjugation. Or rather, your own diminishment of your rights. Supreme Court also just ruled, and I'm going to go over both these today again, 9-0, that anyone Trump even wants to remove under the Aliens, I don't know why I keep saying that wrong, an Alien Enemies Act, first gets a habeas hearing, so due process. And you have to prove they're a gang member. That is what they ruled. And all they did is say, okay, fine, then we're going to do it without the Alien Act. Well, okay, well, that means you could have done it the whole time like that, like we said. But they still require due process. Imagine saying they ruled that we have to give them due process, so now we're going to do it without that act, and pretending like you don't already know that you have due process rights for everybody. That's why they went with the act, because they knew that the act in place would give them some kind of leeway to kind of jump over due process. So they go away from that, and they've sent more people without due process. It's insane how obvious all this is. This is a very dangerous moment for this country. Trump appointed judge in Texas, then based on the Supreme Court ruling, ordered the deportations of Venezuelans to El Salvador to cease pending a hearing. They sent them anyway. That's what's happening. These aren't left-wing judges like they keep trying to scream. That's what the narrative becomes. It's not. It's also right-wing judges that are there, like 6 in the Supreme Court. It says the ones most popular among the right, in fact, upholding the Bill of Rights, which has applied to everyone in the United States, not just citizens, for at least 150 years. This is why I think people like Glenn's, I really want to give a shout out to Glenn in general for, it's clear that he's willing to call it either side based on principle. I think that's what we have to be right now. And the point is, not just citizens, everybody. He also adds, or this person responds saying, we don't have time for all of that. This is what you're going to get online. The American people don't support due process for each and every illegal alien that after they were allowed to enter by the millions, he's just repeating what J.D. Vance wants you to think. It's not going to work that way, Glenn. Glenn says, I realize that some Americans want Trump to ignore and even violate orders of the Supreme Court and to basically act like a king with no powers on his constraint. As I said, I was simply pointing out facts about what Trump appointed and other right-wing judges have ruled. I mean, that's the point. I get it. You want to be able to just do whatever you want. But then you'll cry foul when the Democrats do it to you later, or maybe even the Republicans down the line. The point, though, whether that's a bot or not, we don't have time for that, is what J.D. Vance was pushing. That's the narrative that's now circulating. And of course, the American people, you don't speak for the American people. I'm of the mind that most people are smart enough to recognize what this is, do support due process for everybody, whether illegal or not, but also realize, guys, the 2 points is many of the ones we've already pointed to are not illegal aliens. But here, the same point is made. Because the point is, if due process is not given to these people, you don't know what they are. You're letting the government tell you what that person was who's now rotting in a prison. You'll never hear from him again. Do you realize not a single person who's been sent to El Salvador over the last week plus has even been allowed to call anybody? No one's even been able to, other than the Garcia point we're going to show you because there was pressure, they're not allowed to, they can't even call their family members. So you're telling me you're okay with the government, left or right, being able to go, you go to El Salvador, no process, no verification, because they claim he's an illegal alien. Don't you want to know that they are? What if it's not? What if it's an American citizen? What if it's a political dissident? The fact that you can't wrap your mind around that out there for those that might not be able to is wild to me. I believe most of you can, because you don't know they're illegal until you have due process. That's evidenced by the fact that, yeah, we now have people that are being proven to actually have been here legally with no criminal record who are in El Salvador. And we know that. And yet people like this still push back. Could be bots. Now, the Palantir overlap, 12 Ball says they're all very excited about this new mass arrests and deportations without due process thing. They are. So here, J.D. Vance was all pushing the 20 million illegal alien idea. Joe Lonsdale from Palantir said, well said. A couple friends texted me today about the due process and ruling of law issues around USA immigration situation. And I shared GD's post with my reply. Context is critical for this one. You guys are absolute clowns. So all you're really saying is, as long as we have an excuse, your rights don't matter. That's exactly what the elitists would want you to think, like the Andreessens and the Karps and the Teals, who tell you you need oligarchs to be safe. That's what they pushed on Joe Rogan. That's what Karp's book says. That's what they want from you, to passively let them take control of your lives because they're the good leaders. They're the good authoritarian despots. Do you really think Joe's that stupid? Do you think he doesn't recognize that all it is what's too much, therefore due process doesn't count here? Even for people that are, the point is, we don't know whether they're illegal or not because you don't have due process. And Elon Musk shares it. You know, the South African oligarch technocrat who wants you to believe he's America first, even though he's being driven by Israel like a toy car. Here is where it comes together. As we showed you earlier, Palantir's, and it's leaked because they don't want you to know about this. Their own employees made sure you found out Palantir's plan to help ICE deport people. And Derek said, who could have guessed this would happen? Derek could have. And he did. Just quickly to point out, Palantir, the surveillance giant who's working with Israel to kill people, is taking on an increased role with the immigration with ICE, including finding the physical location of people who are marked for deportation, according to Palantir Slacks and other internal messages obtained by 404 Media. So, are you of the mind that they can somehow pinpoint, target, and hone in on just immigrants? You'd be pretty dumb to think that, because you realize that means Palantir is now scanning the country. Everyone. How else do you think they figure these things out? They're using their databases. They've scooped up from all of their $6 trillion databases from the IRS, from the GSA, and they're using all of that personal information. And the IRS, by the way, I think I just said that. Did I say that one already? Anyway, multiple different massive databases, which they've now exposed. And don't forget, his XAI program is Twitter now. They've combined. And so now they're scanning and picking up all your data, training their models, which in and of itself is a massive crime and a massive privacy issue. But now they're using all of that, plus their Palantir surveillance and their massive satellite ecosystem and their biometric scans, and they're checking everybody in this country. You walk through a store, they're checking whether you're an alien. This is, how else do you think this is happening? The leak shows that Palantir's work with ICE includes producing leads for law enforcement to find people to deport and keeping track of the logistics. Now, it's not just cameras. It's a lot more than that, guys. It is social media. They are tracking you. That used to matter to Republicans. But I guess because they say evil, bad guy immigrants, then everybody shuts down and ignores the reality. Sad to me. But this is exactly like damn near everything else before the fake selection process that we told you was coming, that I hope we were wrong about. I mean, we're not even 6 months in, guys, for crying out loud. It's all right in front of you. And just another addition, Hackable Animal posted this. He says, look what I found here, and it hasn't even been reported yet. who is now embedded inside Citibank? Guess what? Palantir. Now, this is a smaller point from what we were just talking about, but just think about how clear this is. And I'll just show you directly from it. He posted it right there. So Citibank says they've signed a partnership with Palantir to modernize how we leverage data and improve client experience and operational. I'm willing to bet you it's a hell of a lot more than Citibank. The point is a massive, the ones that were basically Obama's administration. Don't miss that important overlap. They're just basically, this is this is across the country, okay, and the world for that matter. Seeing as how we know that Palantir is working with Israel, as well as the fact that Elon Musk, which this is part of it, guys, is already working with the National Reconnaissance Office well back in Biden's administration. That should matter if you're smart enough to understand how that contradicts their claim of the deep state or Democrat pedophile. They're working with both, is the point. You can't hide, they said. As he said, you can't hide because you're now constantly being looked at. That was Biden's administration. That's been handed over to Trump's administration. So otherwise known as just the U.S. government spying on you using this massive satellite, largest spy satellite network ever, the world's largest. Just consider what's going on, what they're doing under the guise of going after immigrants for another country and threatening to remove Americans from this country, which has now happened for the 5th time. And that's just the 5th from Trump, by the way. Leavitt's mentioned it more than once. This has been floated by Rubio. That goes back to February when he went to visit El Salvador. Rubio on the record said that El Salvador said to him that we can take your U.S. citizens as well. So I think that was letting the cat out of the bag a little early, don't you? We talked about it on March 22nd. Trump could send Americans to El Salvador. We talked about it again on the 3rd, more than just these 3 times, by the way, but Americans speaking out about Israel's genocide could be next. In principle, it is the same. I want to include those in case you wanted to watch it. The last one we just did was the 4th time he suggested it. We're going to show you the 5th time today. Before that, don't forget, meet Yaakov Roth, the Department of Justice attorney who's currently spearheading the U.S. slide into fascism, as Jason writes, fighting for deportation for Mohammed Khalil and for the right of the state to disappear people to El Salvador without criminal charges. Okay, for the podcast, here he is sitting on a tank with an Israeli flag on it. Just want to make sure we don't miss what's really going on as the DOJ attorney is fighting to remove people for Israel. We can clearly understand what's happening here. At the Zionist infiltration of this country is on overdrive. And on top of that, I'll include this show that I do think is very important for that specific topic. The new Trump administration and the technocratic Zionist coup of the United States. Now, let's start with some of the most egregious examples before we get into the American part, because I do think it's important. But this is insane to me how clear, how this, put it all aside. Don't ignore it because all that's important. We're going to come back to, but just these cases alone show you where we are. This is from the 15th of April. ICE agents realized they arrested wrong teen, say, take him anyway. Federal immigration authorities apprehended a 19-year-old in New York despite realizing he was not the intended target. The young man, his name is Mirwil Gutierrez, was later deported to El Salvador, the notorious super prison, despite his family's insistence that he had no ties to gangs or criminal history at all. Of course, you know how we would know that for sure? Hiccup all of a sudden, due process. Same thing every time. You realize this is despite the fact that they are well aware that without the Alien Enemies Act that they're required to give due process, and they are anyway, but their mind was doing that, gave them the leeway. The Supreme Court ruled they had to do that with the Alien Enemies Act. So now they just deported people without any due process, without the Aliens Act, knowing what they're doing. On top of the fact that the court basically ruled they had to, if they were doing any of this, they had to take some process. They're not. They seem to be going faster. Into the point to where they just grabbed the kid going for somebody else and they take him anyway. He's already in El Salvador. No criminal record. It says his father, Wilmer Gutierrez, is now searching for answers after his son was snatched by immigration and customs enforcement. Quote, the officers grabbed him and 2 other boys right at the entrance of our building. One said, no, he's not the one. Like they were looking for someone else. But the other said, take him anyway. Wilmer told the platform they're referencing, an independent nonprofit newsroom dedicated to reporting from immigrant communities in New York City. What to know? Gutierrez, who fled instability in Venezuela and was pursuing an asylum case in the United States. This seems to be almost everything we're talking about. was detained in Bronx by ICE agents conducting a targeted operation. So they weren't even going after him, mind you. So they grabbed him because he was brown and in the same place. You realize there's no indication that they had any other reason to go after him other than he was just there with them. Guilt by association of somebody they never even proved was guilty. Now, if you're pursuing an asylum case, you are not here illegally. Simple as that. So the process, and these are people that are coming to try. They're not trying to hop the fence and getting caught. That's what all these ridiculous people online are blindly assuming because they need to or they just don't care. These are people that are going up either through some normal channel, using the app or whatever else and saying, we are seeking asylum. Or I'll show you another example where they're going up and saying, I want citizenship. And are going through the process of actually achieving citizenship, and the Trump administration snatches them up and sends them to El Salvador. Without a criminal record, mind you. So this is why it's so difficult for average people to accept that, because it's the exact opposite of what they're hearing from Trump and Miller and Leavitt and everyone else blindly repeating what they don't understand or lying to you. Because it's obvious. If they have no criminal record, and people like Khalil, who were literally here with a green card, and you're still fighting to send them away, then we know what's happening here. The point is that if you know these things, stop falling into the partisan game or stop being quiet about it. Just like with COVID-19, when you knew these things were dangerous and you didn't stand up and tell your neighbor because you were afraid, stand up. Tell your neighbor. Find the courage to call this out. Otherwise, it's just like the other one. They may die. They may get sent to El Salvador. I'm not trying to make it hyperbolic. You just have to realize that these things are happening right now. In COVID-19, they could have taken the shot, and maybe it could have been deadly. In this case, if you don't let them know what's happening, they're going to be one more voice adding to destroy this country. According to his father, the agents initially acknowledged he was not the individual they were seeking, but chose to take him anyway. Just days later, from a kid they weren't even seeking, he was deported to El Salvador, where he was transferred to a high-security prison known for housing members of violent gangs, including transnational criminals. An 18-year-old kid. Can you even imagine what that's going to do to him if he ever, even a week there? Guys, let's not sugarcoat the reality. Places like this, you get beat up, you get raped because they allow this. That's the whole point. And we've already gone over this. The guy, the barber, was already shown the first time he was there, he was getting beat up and slapped around by the guards and then the prisoners. And these are people with no criminal records, so it's not like they have some toughness to them. These are random people. It says his family and attorneys say that he has got no criminal record, no gang affiliations, and not even a tattoo. So you want to explain to me how this all lines up? If you got no criminal record, no tattoos, again, guilt by association when you haven't even proven the guilt of the person you were actually going for, nor given them due process. Wilmer Gutierrez spoke last to his son on March 16th. March 16th. God, I can't even imagine what that must be like for a parent who knows their kid is innocent. During a brief call allowed by the police before he was sent, he spent days searching for information, visiting police stations, and this is what's so gross about this. Like, where's the humanity on this? I don't care whether you think they're illegal aliens or not. But what right do you have to snatch these people with no process, not even try to inform their family members, move them around to play? If this is what keeps happening, and no one even tries to facilitate anything. The people are lost. Where'd they go? Luckily, in some cases, they find out by seeing their face on some news channel. But these people think about how alarming that must be. Your son, your daughter, your mother, your father just randomly disappears, and you can't even figure it out. And then it's over. You just move on. Nobody's finding you. You can't find out. You have some vague idea of what might have happened. That's got to be one of the most torturous things I can imagine. During the call, other than torture, obviously in the sense of emotional, during the call, Merwil Gutierrez said he was being held in Pennsylvania before he was moved and expected to be transferred to Texas before being returned to Venezuela. That transfer never happened. So here's the thing. Why are these people who have never been to El Salvador being sent to El Salvador? They have no legal precedent for any of this, quite frankly, let alone sending another person who's never, to a country they've never been from, with no crime, no investigation, no charges. And you're paying for that. Wilmer Gutierrez later discovered through a news report, like I said, that his son had been deported to El Salvador under the Alien Enemies Act. Videos circulating online showed detainees in harsh conditions, their heads shaved. Of course, no due process, despite rulings. Quote, I could have understood if he'd been sent back to Venezuela, but why to a foreign country he's never been to? They applied, of course, so this is the important part, guys. When they came here, they applied for temporary protected status. While waiting for their immigration appointment, they took temporary jobs and slept near the border to keep their place in line. Now, the point is, this is the overlapping idea that people are in the process of something. They're not illegal aliens. Now, look, I'm not defending the weaponization of all of this. I get it. But if your answer is to do the wrong thing on the other side of it, then you're part of the problem. The last thing we're arguing, anybody should be arguing, is the removal of rights, the suspension of rights because of what they've allowed to happen, I argue, for that very purpose. Now, William Parra, an immigration attorney from a platform, said Merrill was detained for hanging out with friends and was at the wrong place at the wrong time. ICE was not looking for him, nor is there any evidence whatsoever that he was in any gang. But apparently today, it doesn't matter. That has to be chilling to people, guys. And if your only response is to assume he must have been, then you are part of the problem. Even if he is, you should be demanding that they prove these things. Otherwise, you don't care where this country is going. I mean, if you think it's only one side, then what happens when Democrats take this power and use it against you? Now, a Trump supporter was also taken. ICE detains Trump voter. Now, just so it's clear, as far as I understand it, that 18-year-old kid is in El Salvador. Probably never going to come back unless we successfully get all these people returned, if that's what that, well, let's be clear. Even the ones that are like MS-13 gang members, for example, the reality should still be that they're required to prove that. So if the idea is that they bring them back for the process and then deport them or put them in jail, then that's the reality. I'm not disputing that people who are illegally here should be deported or should be charged with a crime. I've never said otherwise. But I demand that our government do it by the process that was enshrined in the Constitution, or that they prove their claims. And anyone saying that they don't care about that, I mean, it's worthy of ridicule, guys. You literally are saying, I don't care that the government that the government is not required to prove allegations against anybody. It's just wild. Longtime First Time says ICE detains Trump voter celebrating Palm Sunday. Now we have to, you can't miss the overlap to what's going on here from what Batar USA, for example, Israel groups are literally driving the Trump administration to do. They're taking lists directly from Zionist organizations and acting against them. That's why we keep seeing this. And I honestly think that's why it's so frivolous. But they're just taking it and running with it. And it turns out that they're just people that said bad things about Israel. They're not even criminals, not even here illegally, but they don't care. In this case, a Trump supporter. He said he was treated like a criminal. He's been a U.S. citizen for 10 years. He says, I really thought things would change when we have Mr. Trump in office. Change for the better, he said. Things actually changed for the worse. Now, what's interesting is you're going to get any number of things, people acting like, the problem is that people are so ideologically captured that if it doesn't fit in, then they go, he's not that, or he's lying. The reality is, guys, you can see this happening everywhere. If you can't wrap your mind around the obvious nature of somebody, whatever their political standing, getting wrapped up in this because, hey, guess what? They're not checking, they're not proving, they're not giving due process. So that's my point. It could be a Trump supporter, it could be an American citizen, and we would never know because they're not required to put evidence forward. I think it's absolutely clear what's happening. Now, this person was not taken for obvious reasons. The point, though, is that the reality of where this is going. And we're going to go to the next one, who is an American citizen, who, thank God, was also released. But the reality is this is happening. And we already know that there are people who are being sent without crimes, without any due process. That is happening, and the principle is exactly the same. I feel we're building slowly in the direction of where this shoe will drop soon, and I hope I'm wrong.
He just reached for his gun. He's like, step out of the vehicle right now. I said, okay, I'm stepping out.
Bashir Attallah recounts the moments he says U.S. Customs and Border agents detained him and his wife for several hours Sunday night.
For no reason.
Now just think about that. Drawing your gun, and this guy's not a criminal because he's on a list. Now, where do you think that list came from? And why would they act so certainly from a list like that, to the point to where you draw a gun on a person who's not armed, who has no legal background showing he's a violent criminal at all? I mean, there's a lot of things you could fill in the gaps with. Question everything, don't assume, but just recognize how clearly there's a problem if this is how this is going.
And even if there was any reason that I don't know about, they didn't even share that reason with me.
Attallah is a U.S. citizen. The couple was coming.
So again, sorry, no warrant, no identification. That's where we are right now.
coming home after visiting family for Palm Sunday.
I was detained. I was not free to leave. Holding signs, no shoes, no jacket. It was freezing cold.
The real estate attorney says the officers wouldn't let him call his sister, an immigration attorney. She tells us she didn't get a call until 3 hours later.
What happened to my brother is not reasonable. It's an abuse of power.
Celine says CBP accessed Bashir's email, which contained client information, under duress. Bashir says he declined going to the hospital after experiencing chest pain because he didn't want to start the whole process over again.
So just in case you missed that, a person who was not what they were looking for, who they've released, was still violated. The privacy was still violated, still combed through your information. Isn't that a crime? I mean, do we care about that? Where's the justifiable like, where is the reason behind this? The point is, guys, they're acting on assumption from somebody, from some Israeli list they're taking, and they're acting in ways that violate the constitutional rights of this American. But it's the same principle, whether it's an illegal alien or anybody else. But you just look at the consistency here. These people are acting like lawless agents. This is everything we've always been said we were fighting, or this is exactly what they were saying the left was going to be doing. It's all the same thing.
We asked New Hampshire-based immigration attorney Ron Abramson about this case, which he isn't affiliated with.
I mean, detaining people with no basis is not something America does. This sort of
Not what it's supposed to do, but it's done it for a long time.
incident raises the question of how far will this go, and is anyone safe?
Selena Tala asking another question.
What message are we sending to people who are legally in this country?
I really felt like a criminal.
Customs and Border Protection officials got back to us at about 3:45 this afternoon. They say, quote, the traveler's accusations are blatantly false and sensationalized. CBP officers acted in accordance with established protocols.
See, now that's the problem. So who cares if it's established protocols? Is it within law? That's just because Trump's administration says those are the protocols doesn't mean that you're illegally allowed to violate the constitutional rights of Americans or anybody else. But you see where this goes, right? That what they said is blatant. Well, what's false about it? Because the reality is you can break down what actually happened. And the reality is we can see this happening all over the country. The problem is they're trying to kind of mask this in the idea that this is about something other than what is happening, which is just the broad stroke actions against anybody in the wrong place at the right time.
Upon arrival at the port of entry, the traveler was appropriately referred to secondary inspection, a routine lawful process that occurs daily and can apply for any traveler.
Yes, except for the fact that he was taken under the guise of being an illegal alien, was told, you go through it all for yourself. The point is, it's very clear this was somebody who was arrested under that context. They combed through his personal information. He's an American citizen, right? In what world do you, this is, the problem is that they're using this to slowly encroach and slowly rather create precedence on why, if they just have the right narrative that day, then these things are basically put on pause. It's the same conversation across the board. And this gets even more intense. This one's this one's wild to me because of the judge that was basically saying that she didn't have any power, despite her proving that this was an American citizen with the U.S. with a social security card, with their birth certificate. But it doesn't matter because apparently right now ICE is in control.
Just got done. I'm here in the Leon County Courthouse where we just got done with the first appearance of Juan Carlos Lopez Gomez, who was detained Wednesday in Florida, and he had charges of entering the state as an unauthorized immigrant. However, he is an American citizen.
So remember, the claim is entering as an unauthorized citizen. So even though he's got documentation, the claim that he entered illegally is what gets thrown at him. And even though they present the documentation, they say, well, they have to go through the process. What process? If the claim is he's not an American, here's his license right there. See, the problem is, though, is that these are being broadly laid out. They're just kind of scooping up everybody. And then people are falling through the cracks, if not deliberately being put in them, guys. You can decide that. But are we okay with innocent people ending up in torture camps around the world because they want to just get the most possible, or, whatever the argument is? Everything comes down to the violation of your rights. And if they're going to do it to illegal immigrants, you're going to be next. It's the same principle as the point.
His mother came to the courthouse, showed his birth certificate and his social security number card, and that still wasn't enough to get him released. The judge just said that she was sorry, and the attorney working for the state said that because he had an ICE hold, he couldn't be released, even if the court didn't find probable cause for his arrest.
So that what they're showing you, at least in the mind of that judge, an ICE hold now supersedes the judicial branch, or at least in that context, that you're not, that you can rule right there that this person is not actually what they claim. Now, I mean, look, if you can't see, like, if this was the only case, I would be less strict. I would be less, like, my point is, you could argue that maybe I wouldn't be as harsh about it. Just because it's one case and you never know. But the bottom line is we can stand back and look at the big picture right now and see that the recurring actions are sloppy, if not deliberately so. And people like this are either being caught in this or deliberately put in this because they're on a list. So Dropsite News covered this. U.S. citizen born in Georgia has been arrested for entering Georgia as an unauthorized alien, despite not being that. During a hearing in Leon County, his mother presented his identification, but the judge said she had no authority to release him. Just think about that. He was on hold for 48 hours. And these detentions we've seen which are harsh, in many cases not made for more than 12 hours. So now it says screenshots from the office, just information if you want to check it for yourself. The point is he has been released. Here they are at the Leon County Jail with the mom. 20-year-old U.S. citizens arrested for illegally entering Florida after a traffic stop. So it's all, that's one of the things we keep seeing too, is you got people that are being picked up because they have some parking tickets and just happen to be the wrong, rarely, I promise you this is what it comes down to. People who have on social media said the wrong things about Israel, who has been a part of a protest, for example, and then the smallest infraction, and they're kicking people out of the country all over the place. And some of them, guys, how crazy it is. We're talking about people with no record who are being scooped up like that and being sent to places like El Salvador. Like somehow we argue that's justifiable. Now, here he is hugging his mom. He got released yesterday. Now, the point, though, is the ongoing reality of this is that you can be swept up into something like this. And, look, this is the real point to take away from this. If there's no due process, like we're seeing, right? And this person gets swept up, put in this process, and they broad stroke these conversations, and suddenly he's on the next plane to El Salvador. Well, here we go. There's another mistaken error. And sorry, we can't get him back, which is what they keep telling you. If you can't piece together right there why this is so important, then I don't think you want to. We need to demand that they go through the legal processes or this is going to happen. And I think by design, quite frankly, but at the very least, accident, an American or anybody else. Because right there, you could see how easily this could go. He's in there for 48 hours. Let's just say he had the wrong tattoo, whatever else. Suddenly he's caught up in this group. The group gets sent. That already happened. Just because he wasn't a U.S. citizen does not change the reality that he was legally in this country. Even Garcia, they keep claiming he was here illegally. That wasn't the case. Just like the process of either seeking asylum, being given asylum, being, seeking actual citizenship, whether you have it or not, you're not an illegal alien if you're in the process. He was given that asylum. They just keep saying illegal alien, terrorist, human trafficker, because they know they need to bury this very dangerous case for them in claims that he's a monster. U.S. citizen, guys. Now, Melnick also points this out. This is Aaron from the full name again? American Immigration Council. Just again, the reason he's followed count. Doesn't mean you believe in everything he's saying. Like, I don't know, the argument that you somehow blindly take sides because you follow somebody is ridiculous. That's partisanship for you. The point is that he gives you source material. That's all that should matter. Read it for yourself. The problem is that people don't want to read the source material. They want to listen to their chosen ideologue. What he's pointing out here is that a few things about the case we just discussed with this girl, I just forgot his name. The one she was referring to, here, the young man. He appears to have been charged under a law which is currently enjoined by a federal court, which would make the arrest and charges unlawful. So think that's on top of everything else. Local law enforcement are actually not required to honor ICE holds. So what that shows me again is the judge at least is either too afraid to speak out or thought otherwise. And that is alarming. Oh, and this was just the same thing. Just this Jackie Llanos looks like covering the story, showing you that they'd been released. Now, the fifth time, I won't play them all again, but I just want you to remember that for the fifth time now, Donald Trump has floated this idea. I don't know how we could pretend like this should not be taken seriously at this point. If even one of them was said, it should be enough. But here it was on March 26th where I stated that Trump has floated sending Americans to El Salvador. And I said, this is an attack on all you believe you're fighting for under a thin veneer of fighting Democrats. Because he names the Tesla terrorists and what the focus will be. Right? Now, this was the fourth time. I just didn't have, there's two others before that, even a fifth or a sixth and a seventh, by the way, if you look at Rubio and what Leavitt has said more than once. But for the fourth time on April 14th, Trump admin tells you that they're considering sending Americans to foreign prisons. Regardless of the severity of their crimes, this isn't just unconstitutional, it's illegal. That's not an opinion. That's a fundamental fact. The amount of people arguing otherwise, that's the days where I get overwhelmed. Because I worry. I know people in my life that are falling for this stuff. So I just wonder whether there's that many people that just actually don't know they're wrong. Or people out there that just don't care because they just hate people like this so much, even though you don't know them. It worries me. For the blind supporters, the simple question is, would you support this if Biden was doing it? But exactly the same thing. The same people, the same thing, and this was Obama or Clinton standing back there. We all know the answer to that, and that shows you the reality, guys. Hopefully that wakes a few of you free from this to realize that it should matter, regardless of who it is, because it is a problem. This person says, if they beat 90-year-olds with baseball bats, if they rape 80-year-old women, he says, I would support anyone wanting to send those fools out of here. You see, and look, I mean, it's American, small count. Point. If you're going to take him seriously as he's trolling, then at least give your audience the full context of what he said. Well, that's exactly what he said, by the way. So these are people trying to gaslight you. Okay. First of all, trolling, and that's why I included that. I'm telling you guys, there's people telling you that that what he's doing is okay. People telling you that you're wrong about what he's saying. People telling you that you're just being trolled and it's very Israeli right now for them to go, here's 75 different possible narratives. You pick which one you like best, as long as it's not the real one, which is that they're undermining the Constitution. The point is, it doesn't matter the severity of the claims, guys. It doesn't matter. The principle is all that matters. If it's a grandma beating, raping maniac or a guy walking the street at the wrong time, it is the same point. Rights don't change based on the severity of your crime. Neither does free speech, but that's what they want you to think. And Matt Lockwood rightly says, I don't give an F about him trolling. He's the president of the United States. Nothing this unconstitutional should be used for trolling. And he's not trolling, guys. That's the point, is we already see what's happening. And if it's not just Trump's administration, it's just the government. Look back. Obama and the indefinite detention of Americans that they've all continued to put forward. The Patriot Act, they've all continued. The War Powers Act, the FISA Act, FISA, all of it, guys. Every one of them have continued the same things, and we can't see that they're all the same thing. And this one is interesting. To that response right there, this person says, good. Heinously violent criminals, again, assuming that's what we're talking, just because he goes grandma rapers and this, that means everyone he's sending is like that? No. Here's a guy who's innocent, here legally, with no criminal record, but you hate him, don't you? Because Trump said grandma rapers. Well, heinously violent criminals, he says, are being treated too softly here. Well, there's the law, and there's not the law. But he goes, if it's between a death penalty or horrible jail, I'd rather them suffer in a SHIT hole jail. He's not talking about average B&E criminals here. See, I know, whether it's a bot or not, that these people are real out there. Some people have opinions like this. It's insane. Same point. It doesn't matter. If you care about constitutional rights, if you care about free speech, if you care about anything we're talking about, it doesn't matter what crime we're discussing. That's what he's using to convince small-minded people to think that it makes sense because bad crime. Well, crime is applied with the law. It doesn't matter what happens. The crime is applied with the law that fit. The reality is your constitutional rights apply no matter what, as you guys all know. I simply said, IDF bots have been allowed to flood this platform. CHEQ actively driving you through propaganda to destroy your own country, in my opinion. I said, is this one of them below? Or just a painfully uninformed, uneducated partisan American? You can decide. Now, this one you might not have seen before we get to the fifth example. This was Jason Bassler shared this with me. Here's Trump getting caught on a leaked video with Bukele, however you say his name, floating and laughing about the idea of sending homegrown Americans to foreign prisons. But he's trolling, though, guys. He's just making fun of you.
And I just want to thank, and these people.
That's not the one. Here it is.
Well, I'm not feel supportive. I want to do, homegrown criminals next. Yeah. They said homegrowns are next. The homegrowns built. You got to build about 5 more places. Yeah, that's fair. All right. It's not big enough.
That they're all just yucking it up, sitting there laughing about building prisons for Americans to rot in El Salvador. I mean, in principle, it doesn't matter the crime, like we're saying. It doesn't matter what crime you're talking about. There's no legal precedent to send literally anybody to a foreign prison with your tax dollars, let alone American citizens, for which there are crimes and processes. I have these moments where I'm like, this can't be real. We cannot be in this position with Americans who 10 seconds ago were the ones screaming about the importance of the Constitution, now being the ones asking for you to destroy it because brown people, because Israel narrative, because whatever else, or severe beaten grandma crimes. It doesn't change the reality that you're being convinced to undermine what you are fighting for. It's flabbergasting to me. I said, it just doesn't stop. Please find the courage to call this out before it's too late. And Jason says, not only did Trump flirt with deporting U.S. citizens, he was also caught on hot mic saying homegrowns are next. Let me see if this pops up. Yeah, I'm glad I grabbed that. This was from February 4th, guys. So if you don't think this is a clear agenda, you're not paying attention, in my opinion. Rubio says El Salvador offers to accept U.S. deportees of any nationality, including violent American criminals. February 4th, like well before this became a big talking point. Here we are. 5 times Donald Trump has now floated the idea of doing that. Who do you think that benefits, guys? Do you think that benefits the American people? Do you think that builds our understanding of what we believe in? There's only one real thing that this works for right now, guys, and it's not American interest. It's sure as hell not America first. Here's what Trump just said again.
We use it for violent criminals, our own violent criminals.
I call them homegrown criminals.
Yes.
I mean, the
homegrowns.
The ones that grew up and something went wrong and they hit people over the head with a baseball bat. We have, and push people into subways just before the train gets there, like you see happening sometimes. We are looking into it and we want to do it. I would love to do that.
I'd love to do that, he says. And again, always using the most extreme examples because he knows that'll get some people. But okay, explain this for me. So he's telling you it's all the radical, crazy ones, right? Okay. Well, so he said that with the deportation, right? Going after all the worst criminal, rapist, terrorist, except here's a PhD student and here's the one from Tufts and here's a Harvard student, and here's one from Columbia. All, high-level academics. Oh, all of them have no criminal record, by the way. Or here are all the people that are the evil gang members, except he's not, and he's here legally. Right, so ask yourself, maybe the same thing will happen there. Just maybe. That you'll give you the claim of the big bad thing and then do whatever they want. Pretty much how it's always gone. Sure wish we could have the memory to understand how many times that's happened over and over in this country, left or right. But Trump has now enthusiastically discussed sending Americans to foreign prisons for the 5th time, using, of course, the same terminology that the left used back in 2016, or about January 6ers. We already forgot that, didn't we? Who are America's homegrown terrorists? Are we forgetting that Biden's discussion? Hold on, where was that? That's weird. 1 second. Huh. God, that's so crazy how sometimes these things, God, that's so wild. Here's the article I was just going for. Don't even want to tell you what just happened. Waste time. The old broken internet that we live in today, or the everything's broken and weird. But here is what Whitney wrote for TLAV back in 2021. Who is a terrorist in Biden's America? Well, guess what? It's the same person who's a terrorist in Trump's America. People that speak out against the government. Whatever the claim is, whatever the narrative, that's where this goes. So it's the same exact thing we're dealing with now. Right? So the same thing, the homegrown terrorist, the domestic terrorist focus, which we've been telling you is building, which has been coming. They use the red hats and they use anti-Semitism, and now they're using the Democrats and anti-Semitism. Almost like it's the same thing. Crazy, right? Right in front of you. Here is the NPR article in case you want to check it out. So here are some comments that I want to share. And maybe I'll skip some because it's just sort of redundant, but some of these people say interesting things. So Tanya says, just because it offends your feelers does not mean it's illegal or unethical. Well, it is, though, both of those things, regardless of whether I care about it, which is just, so the response is that you have an emotional response, despite what I'm saying is we can literally, this is what scares me. Do they not know they're wrong? Is it a bot? Maybe it's not worth the time. The sad here, at least some people go, yep, it is illegal and unethical. Here's the link to the constitutional reality. Of course, no response. So that tells me it's probably a bot trying to get some engagement to get to the top of the conversation. The change is that people out there do think these things, though, and they do fall for it. Yes, it is unconstitutional. It is illegal. There's no way around it. That's 100% accurate. Look, it's even by their own arguments. If the argument is we just can't do it, it's too busy, it'll take up too much time, they're not even trying to argue that it's legal or that they're telling you it is, but it's okay because it's just too much to do. This person says the same thing. Well, I already read that one for you, that they're trolling. E-Punk says, if they are blatant traitors who committed treason against our country, they are anti-American and don't deserve the rights of American citizens because they hate America. My God, talk about the dumbest argument of the day. Well, see, this is the problem, though. So now by that logic, Democrats can do that. Oh, and here comes Jay. You mean like the January 6ers? Oops. Of course, to him, that doesn't make sense because we're not bad guys. But it's just dumb, guys. It's ignorance or a bot. Because the point is, it doesn't, the Democrats are the government too. So your argument is that if the government decides you're a traitor, that they can take your rights away. Thank you for being exactly the problem that they want. You are literally what they're hoping for. This person is the agenda, like exactly what they want from you. I don't know why we can't see that right now, at least some people. It's so transparent right now. Now, this is an interesting clip. Should I didn't close that, the wrong one? Yeah, okay, this is an interesting clip. Now, I'm going to go over this where we get to Van Hollen as well as this guy. You know my opinion, guys. I don't trust government in general. I don't think anybody in these power positions at the very least, we should not trust any of them. Whether they're honest or not, it's just smart. We should be questioning them more than ever, especially if we want better from them. I am of the mind, just because of history, look back how often it's verified for us. These people are just opportunists who do the right thing where it suits them, where it benefits them in some way. Now, look, I guarantee in some cases I'm wrong. I'd have to believe in some cases that, but based on history and precedent and facts, it's a good bet to say that these people aren't really usually doing what they claim they're doing. But just as from a human point, I have to believe there's some positivity out there. My point in saying all that is here's Jim McGovern standing up and saying the right thing. Now, that's not to say that he's the right guy. Never is that the argument. But what frustrates me is the same point. Is it because he's somebody that's seen as the wrong guy? He's the Democrat. And suddenly him saying it means that what that he's saying is wrong. It's an easy way to get you to ignore the obvious if they just throw at you the two-party illusion, right? Same with the Democrats. If you get a Republican coming out and saying the thing they want, they'll go, no, because that's lazy thinking. Right now, regardless of who says this, it's easy to prove this is a problem, and it should be called out.
Excuse me, Senator Grassley, on that same subject, the Constitution, the framers of the Constitution said that every person, not citizen, every person within the jurisdiction of the United States has due process. That is violated by the administration, and we would like to know what you, as the people, the Congress, who are supposed to rein in this dictator, what are you going to do about it? These people have been sentenced to life imprisonment in a foreign country with no due process.
Many of them who were here legally and had no criminal record for the umpteenth time. All right, but buddy, because he called him a dictator, all the team sport Republicans are going to push back and say it's all false and ignore, and that's probably how it was meant to go. Ignore the facts in there, which are that this is illegal, that is unconstitutional, regardless of what other Democrat, Republican narratives get thrown in.
Our government cannot do anything? Why won't you do your job, Senator?
Yes. Why? Obeying the Supreme Court. Trump's not obeying the Supreme Court. He just.
So he says, ask yourself, what's going to stop the government from deporting you? See, and you get the Rubios out there framing this like some flailing Democrat argument, and let's try to think of another example. What's his name? I'll point to in a second. You know, the Posobics and the rest of them out there are gaslighting the whole thing and screaming the same thing instead of just acknowledging that, yes, obviously, because even Trump has floated the idea of doing that next. So your argument is that somehow it's a Democrat thing to suggest you could be next, even though Trump has literally said you could be next? That seems pretty stupid, but people fall in the cracks all the time. He says, how would you prove it's an error if you don't have due process? Guys, this is what I was saying well before this became a talking point in the corporate media. Honestly, half the time I wonder whether that's why this is happening. You do know that TLAV is far more influential than we ever give it credit for. We know that. But it's funny to me how clearly we were saying, like day one, we were making these same points. Because it's factually correct, not because it's a partisan thing. If it can happen to anyone, it can happen to you. That's obvious. Now, this is wild to me. Kennedy already came out and showed himself to be an idiot about this conversation. Partisan, I should say, because he knows he's wrong. They all know they're wrong. I think that's obvious. This is, he speaks for itself. It's wild to me. So Senator Kennedy's asked about this, saying, you have a smart legal mind, and is confronted with what Trump just said about sending American citizens to a foreign prison. There's no error in that conversation, guys. It's not only unprecedented, it's very clear that's it violates the Constitution in multiple ways. Here's what he says about this. And it just shows you how clearly this is a lockstep agenda. And even the Democrats aren't really doing anything about it. They're out there screaming and putting their hair on fire, but no one's doing anything. Congress should be already taking action against so many things that have happened. I'm going to come to that in a second because it's a terrifying reality of where we go next if nothing happens from Congress. And even if they do, if they just continue if they have no power, I think we're already beginning to see that we don't live in the place we think if we ever have, that we think we do.
Brand new sound from President Trump, who is sitting down with Rachel Campos Duffy at 4 o'clock Eastern time on the Fox Spanish channel. And he said this on that. Listen.
Could we use it for violent criminals, our own violent criminals?
I call them homegrown criminals.
Yes.
I mean, the
homegrowns.
The ones that grew up and something went wrong and they hit people over the head with a baseball bat. We have, and push people into subways just before the train gets there, like you see happening sometimes. We are looking into it and we want to do it. I would love to do that.
Well, Senator Kennedy, you are a smart legal mind. Do you have any problem with that?
No, none. I think the president's right.
Oh, my God. I mean, how do you make sense of that? See, this is what's scary, is that you will get people that aren't smart enough to understand that's wrong, who will just go along with the guy who you have a smart legal mind, so blindly agree with whatever he says next. I mean, where's the pushback? I mean, it's mind-blowing to me. I mean, you realize we have people like conservative justices, like Judge Knapp, for example, any other people we're talking about that are calling this out all across the line, or judge rulings like we said in the past, like the foundational Supreme Court rulings that have already made these cases clear. These people are literally destroying this country for a foreign power, in my opinion, and we're watching it happen in front of us. And whatever you think the background is, you have to understand what he just said there. You should be running him out of town. This is like them standing up and saying Trump is going to remove all the guns from everybody because illegal immigrants are using them first. There's so many guns. We're going to remove them all first and we'll deal with it afterward. Oh, yeah, that makes sense because immigrants. It's the same difference in principle, guys. What they're arguing is we don't have to give rights to people because of the skirt of. Let's be clear. Americans. The one point he's talking about right now is Americans. Sending Americans to foreign prisons, whether criminals or not. And the great legal mind said, yeah, no big deal. I'd love for you to give one example, Kennedy, of any context, of any precedent, of any law that says you're allowed to send Americans anywhere outside this country against their will, whether criminals or not. The rights are very clear about how this goes. They know that. They don't care. It's absolutely chilling to me. And see, this is what kills me, guys, is that I have to sit here and argue against people that know they're lying. Now, am I crazy? Does everybody out there already know that? Am I only arguing with a bunch of morons like Cat Turd Online, or is this something that everybody already sees, or are we actually falling to this right now? I don't know. That's what worries me. Here's another example. And of course, because it's CNN and the responses come back and forth, the Democrats are bad, we're right, no matter what. Facts don't matter. Same thing the left did during COVID-19. It's the same stupid thing over and over, and we just get to oscillate around. One day I'm a crazy Republican, next day I'm a crazy lefty, and the reality is we're simply staying consistent with our principles about what matters, what's correct, what's right, what's legal, what's constitutional. In this case, it starts with a quick point about the Supreme Court ruling we're going to talk about next, but goes into the American... You realize 5 times Trump has said that now. 5 times. This was on the 16th. So there have been 4 times when this was recorded. 4 times Trump has happily discussed sending American citizens to a foreign country. And the way he responds acts like it couldn't be possible.
And the Supreme Court did weigh in and say that it agreed that it agreed with the district judge saying that the U.S. administration.
No, it did not.
God. So here we go. This is just the opening point. We'll get to this next. This is so I mean, again, I'm of the mind that somebody like this, he actually doesn't know he's wrong. He could know he's wrong and doesn't care, which is more alarming, but realize that it's undeniable. I'll go through it myself and read it to you like I've already done. Both of them, both 9-0 rulings in the Supreme Court, which both clearly acknowledge everything we're talking about. And he only pushes back because they've been told to. Like, this is the narrative. You can't let them say that. No, we won that. Like Miller screams. They did not. The judges themselves say that's not true. And here we are with him pushing back on CNN because mindless followers will see him say it and go, yeah, dunk on those Democrats. You're falling for it.
Yes, let me finish my sentence. Congressman, I know you're trying to create a moment. I understand you're trying to create a moment right now to try to get pickup. And that's self-serving. That's not serving our viewers.
I think we know who's trying to commit the moment here.
Yeah, both of you. As always, both of you.
We know that.
No, what I am laying out here is facts. The Supreme Court, the 4-page opinion, agreed with the lower court judge that the administration should, quote unquote, facilitate his return. Now, in terms of effectuate, it left it to the lower court to clarify. And it said that the president, everyone can read it, it's online. And it said that the president does have foreign affairs protections, and that the district court judge should take that into account when providing that clarification. That's exactly what was said. It was not a forceful opinion. It certainly had ambiguity, but that's what the Supreme Court said. The president also says he is looking into deporting U.S. citizens who have committed violent crimes. Many legal experts say that's just flatly unconstitutional. Do you agree?
I hate the way they say that. Many legal experts, it's black and white. It's point blank unconstitutional. But you know, I bet you she's never even read it for all we know. But it's just, I hate that. But this is the way he responds. 4 times he said that already, publicly, multiple channels.
Agree with the president on this case, or do you think he should back off this threat?
I didn't hear what he said specifically. I'm not sure what the context is, so I'm not going to comment on what the context of that comment was, because I don't think the president would be inferring that he's going to break the constitutionality of due process for citizens of the United States. I think
that's literally exactly what he's saying. And he said it more than once. If they're bad guys, though, so it's okay, right? Just look online. So he either knows that and is afraid to talk about it, or he's literally just gleaning what he's not looking, which seems to make sense when he doesn't even understand the ruling of the Supreme Court, or he's lying about it. And look, it's not about one side, guys. The way the right is doing this right now is, I mean, it may be more severe in some cases, but it is just as completely blinded by the narrative as the left was during COVID. It's the same thing. They're just using the partisanship back and forth on this never-ending hamster wheel or teeter-totter to get people to follow just a little bit more.
It's absurd.
Here is Gorka. How this guy ever ended up, I mean, it's just so alarming to see these complete hacks on like ending up in positions of power. He says, this is Trump's counterterrorism czar. That's fantastic. He says, now saying that anyone advocating for due process is aiding and abetting terrorists. So I'll let it speak first. Listen to what he says. The idea that simply suggesting that what they're doing is wrong, he's trying to threaten you right now. He's trying to scare you, like everything else they're doing, from standing up and pointing out what's happening is wrong. Listen to what he says.
Is that the taxonomy of politics in America is dead. It's not left and right. It's not even Republican or Democrat. There's one line that divides us. Do you love America or do you hate America? It's really quite that simple.
Yeah, he's almost not wrong, by the way. And what's crazy is he goes on to frame the people that are violating the Constitution as the ones loving America, and the ones that are calling that out as the ones that don't. Frankly, both of those sides are the ones that are undermining this country, and the American people that are recognizing what's going on are the ones fighting for this that love America. Well, I'll overlap that with the nuance, which is there's a lot of people on both the partisanships that are convinced what they're doing is for the country. But I have to say that the only way that makes sense to me is that they're just not bright enough to see that they're being played. I mean, it's very simple in my opinion. I think it's very obvious. It's like, again, reading the First Amendment and arguing they can censor you whenever they want as long as they make a good excuse. Well, then you haven't read the First Amendment. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. But the point is, he goes on to frame it that way.
And we have people who love America, like the president, like his cabinet, like the directors of his agencies, who want to protect Americans. And then there is...
by destroying your rights, right? To protect Americans by threatening to send them to foreign countries. Now, look, Americans don't mean the ones not breaking the law. That means everybody, or accused of breaking the law, right? If you're a criminal, you're still an American, guys. So they're just playing this game by driving you further into these categories. What they're doing is destroying this country in 1,000 different ways. Your government, not just the right or just the left. People like this are either too dumb to know that they're involved in that, or are actively trying to drive you into a clear direction. I mean, I've never seen a more obvious example of what you think Gorka wouldn't call this out if Biden was doing this? If Biden was sending people in red hats to foreign countries, or let's just say people who are here on visas, who are protesting the trucker convoy, and send them to foreign governments, you don't think he'd be freaking out about that? You damn right he would have, because it matters. He just doesn't care when it's people he doesn't like because he's a partisan hack.
The other side that is on the side of the cartel members, on the side of the illegal aliens, on the...
Right. You mean the ones that weren't cartel members, or the ones that weren't legal aliens, but you're just claiming that? So people that are fighting for people who are neither of those things are supporting those things?
The side of the terrorists. And you have to ask yourself, are they technically aiding and abetting them? Because aiding and abetting criminals and terrorists is a crime in federal statute, Rob.
Yeah. You mean like what you're doing with Israel, or many other countries around the world, or many terrorists around the world, or different groups you're funding to carry out regime change? Oh, that's okay. We're going to threaten you with aiding and abetting terrorism for fighting for Garcia, who's neither of those things, because you claim he is, without due process or evidence. It's so obvious to see what a problem, even if everything they're saying is true, the way they're doing this is so obviously wrong. It blows me away that this is not completely cascading over the top. Like they haven't just lost control of this by now. That's what worries me more than anything. How is this still, it's like the genocide in Israel. How is it still going? It really does give you a chilling insight into where we really are. And it's not where we thought we were. Here, Melnick points out the Fourth Circuit unanimously has now rejected Donald Trump's request to halt the proceedings into Garcia's case. That was yesterday. So you see, they're still trying to stop, while acting like they're not bound by anything. They're clearly still in some ways trying to win to get this to go away. They know what's happening. And again, don't forget, the reason, in my opinion, but I think it's obvious, that neither of them want to give this up. Because if he's forced to be brought back, they will either have to prove that they do nothing, which then they'll be very politically unpopular with their own side, or they'll have to go forward with the claims and actually produce evidence, which they don't have. They keep saying they do, and if they do, then why wouldn't they just make this? They could easily make this go away. The reason they don't is because it will become a political fiasco, because they know they're lying, guys. It is the easiest thing to prove in this conversation. But so they've ruled again. A Reagan appointee, Wilkinson, writes that the Trump administration's position is, quote, shocking not only to judges, but to the intuitive sense of liberty that Americans still hold dear. Now, I'm going to read this for you in a second. Whole thing. He says, we yet cling to the hope that it is not naive to believe our good brethren in the executive branch perceive the rule of law as vital to the American ethos. Here's the full decision. I think it's worth hearing all of this. So, again, this was from the 17th. Gilmore, Abrego Garcia, Vasquez, versus Cristian Ohm. Wilkerson, circuit judge, with whom King and Thacker circuit judges join. Upon review of the government's motion, the court denies the motion for an emergency stay pending appeal and for a writ of mandamus. The relief the government is requesting is both extraordinary and premature. While we fully respect the executive's robust assertion of its Article 2 powers, we shall not see things like that they use to say they just told us we can do whatever we want. They play on the ignorance of people. It's not all what that says. We shall not micromanage the efforts of a fine district judge attempting to implement the Supreme Court's decision. All right, so they're just trying to work their way through other courts to make the claim. The Supreme Court has already ruled this. They're just trying to uphold the decision that's already been made. And this is their effort to try to undermine that, and they've got pushback on. And realize that the game of making only political active Democrat judges is long since been over, especially since the Supreme Court is 6 conservatives. The bottom line is all over the place. This is not what they claim it is. It says it is difficult in some cases to get to the very heart of the matter. But in this case, it is not hard at all. The government is asserting a right to stash away residents of this country in foreign prisons without the semblance of due process that is the foundation of our constitutional order. Further, I mean, think about how important that is, guys. That is the reality. And what they're doing, even with a criminal, is undermining that by not doing that, not giving them the process that they are due. Everyone. Further, it claims in essence that because it has rid itself of custody, that there is nothing that can be done. This should be shocking, not only to judges. That's in regard to them saying, we can't get him back. It's not our fault. It's not our responsibility, even though it's both of those things. Shocking not only to judges, but to the intuitive sense of liberty that Americans far removed from courthouses still hold dear. The government asserts that Abrego Garcia is a terrorist and a member of MS-13. Perhaps, but perhaps not. Regardless, and I'm going to go into the actual documents and the actual court cases and the Supreme Court ruling, all of which tell you there is no evidence. Even Grok, responding to what Benny Johnson shared a screenshot of, saying there is no evidence to those claims. I'll go through it for the 3rd time today. But it's saying, regardless, that's why they say perhaps, perhaps not, because it is not a verified reality. Like I said, maybe he is. No, but there's no evidence to back that up, and everything that the government's put forward has been either proven to be a lie or something that they're trying to manipulate you into thinking, which is currently not the reality based on the evidence they hold. It says, regardless, he is still entitled to due process. Yes, guys, that's a crazy thing that we even argue against that. If the government is confident in its position, it should be assured that position will prevail in the proceedings to terminate the withholding of removal order. It's obvious. The only reason they wouldn't go forward is because they know they can't prove their claims. It says requiring that the government prove by a preponderance of their evidence that the alien is no longer entitled to a withholding of removal. That had to do with the political persecution from El Salvador. That's Bukele's government they're talking about, guys. You know, the same government that removed civil rights, that suspended the Constitution, removed the judges so they could run for another term, even though he wasn't legally allowed to, turning into a one-party system, putting people in prison without due process. Same thing, guys. Welcome to the future of your country. So the point is that they did that for political persecution from his government, and then they just sent him back to that location. If I hadn't have seen him in the meeting that I'll show you in a minute, I was wondering whether he was dead because of this exact conversation. Was he the person that Bukele was going for? But it says, moreover, the government has conceded that Garcia was wrongly or mistakenly deported, because they have. Here it is enshrined in yet another court ruling, because they did say that publicly. But it goes, why then should it not make what was wrong right? Seems obvious, right? Rectify the mistake. It says the Supreme Court's decision remains, as always, our guidepost. That decision rightly requires the lower federal courts to give, quote, due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs. All right. That's what they keep trying to do. See, they just said we can do whatever we want. They're simply regarding what is static reality. They're saying, yes, you have to do what they're ordering. No one's trying to infringe on your perceived executive branch powers. That's what they're saying. Now it says that would allow sensitive diplomatic negotiations to be removed from public view. It would recognize as well that the facilitation of Garcia's return leaves the executive branch with options in the execution to which the courts, in accordance with the Supreme Court's decision, should extend a genuine deference. That decision struck a balance that does not permit lower courts to leave Article 2 by the wayside. The Supreme Court's decision does not, however, allow the government to do essentially nothing. See, that's the point. They're simply outlining, like they'll just caption this and go, see, they said we won. That's not the reality. And this is a different one. I'm going to go to the Supreme Court ruling they're citing. This is an extension of that, and they're still pretending like they won. The point is, they're saying the Supreme Court ruling said, they're trying to act like they said, we just have to wait and accept him when he comes here. That's not what they said. Not even what the word facilitate means. It says it requires the government to, quote, facilitate Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. It says facilitate is an active verb. See, they're very clear about this. It requires that steps be taken, as the Supreme Court has made perfectly clear. And they know this, and they're just lying to their blind, uninformed followers. That's not a knock on one side or the other. It's partisanship, guys. It says the government should be prepared to share what it can concerning the steps it has taken. Now, of which, by the way, they've come back and said nothing. Like they've literally come back and said, we didn't do anything. Challenging them to make, this is where we come to the point of where they're being held in contempt. Or that's about to happen, it seems. The plain and active meaning of the word cannot be diluted by its constriction, as the government would have it, to a narrow term of art. They're just calling them point blank, calling them out for what they're doing. You can't pretend like that word means something it doesn't. It's obvious what we're acting for. It's an active verb. You're supposed to be doing something. We are not bound in this context by a definition created by an administrative agency and contained by mere policy directive. Thus, the government's argument that it must do is that all it must do is, quote, remove any domestic barriers to his return for says motion for stay at 2. That's referencing the point is to continue for the sentence. Remove any domestic barriers to his return is not well taken in light of the Supreme Court's command that the government facilitate his return and release from custody. Quote, facilitation does not permit the admittedly erroneous deportation of an individual to the one country's prison that the withholding order forbids, and further, to do so in disregard of a court order that the government not so subtly spurns. Facilitation, in quotes, does not sanction the abrogation of habeas corpus through the transfer of custody to foreign detention centers in the manner attempted here. How do we not? I mean, look, this is either the Trump administration bombastically violating the sacred realities of this country, or it is being done for somebody else. It's about as simple as I can make that. And you need to recognize how clearly this is destroying this country. Now it stops. It's easily rectified. But if this keeps going right now, we see, I'm going to pause it right there because I want to make this point in a second about where this goes if Congress does not do something about it. If he pushes back on the Supreme Court, nothing happens, and they do nothing. That very well may be the end of this country in the sense of what we believe we are. And maybe it's always been that way, but we'll come to that in a second. Guys, that is not hyperbolic. I'll explain in a second. It says allowing this would facilitate foreign detention more than it would domestic return. Obviously, it would reduce the rule of law to lawless and tarnish the very values for which Americans of diverse views and persuasions have always stood. Okay, all they're saying is it would make it lawless and undermine American values. The government is obviously frustrated and displeased with the ruling of the court. Let one thing be clear, they write. Court rulings are not above criticism. Criticism keeps us on our toes and helps us do a better job. But the point they're making there is if you disagree with the ruling, then that's why this process exists. Challenge it, go forward. The game they're playing where if a court challenges their ruling, somehow they're trying to undermine executive power is a game played on dumb people to get you to think that the president can do whatever they want. It's not true. Sure as hell where we might be and are going, but the way we pretend this country exists from the Constitution, that's not the reality. Now it goes on to say, court rulings can overstep and they can further intrude upon the prerogatives of other branches. Courts thus speak with the knowledge of their imperfections, but also with a sense that they instill a fidelity to law that would be sorely missed in their absence. I mean, imagine if there was no pushback at all right now from the courts. I mean, we would already live in the system I think they're trying to create, if not already. Energy in the executive is much to be respected, it says. It can rescue governments from its lassitude and recalibrate imbalances too long left unexamined. And by the way, the exact same opposite in regard to what the too much power in the executive and the lack of power from Congress. It says the knowledge that executive energy is a perishable quality understandably breeds impatience with the courts. Courts, in turn, are frequently attuned to caution and are often uneasy with the executive branch's breakneck pace. And the differences do not end there. Now, that's why they're important to challenge each other, guys. The executive is inherently focused upon ends. The judiciary, much more on the means. Ends are bestowed on the executive by electoral outcomes. Means are entrusted to all of the government, but most especially to the judiciary by the Constitution itself. The executive possesses enormous powers to prosecute and to deport, but with powers come restraints. If today the executive claims the right to deport without due process and in disregard of the court orders, what assurance will there be tomorrow that it will not deport American citizens and then disclaim responsibility to bring them home? That's exactly the point. That is the crux of the point. I argue where they're building it towards. He's already floated that idea. And what assurance, they continue, shall there be that the executive will not train train its broad discretionary powers upon its political enemies? This is just basic let's pretend you think they're the good guys. What happens when the Democrats are in power? It says the threat, even if not the actuality, would always be present. And the executive's obligation to, quote, take care that the laws be faithfully executed would lose its meaning. I think we're already there today. And that's not left or right. That's just the way our government's been driving for decades. Today, both the United States and the El Salvadorian governments disclaim any authority and or responsibility to return Garcia. We are told that neither government has the power to act, which is just embarrassing. We all know that's not true, obviously. The result will be, of course, unless they mean somebody else, by the way, who does have the power over both of them. I don't believe that's what they mean. Clearly, they could both make it happen, but it's worth pointing out. The result will be to leave matters generally to Garcia, specifically in an interminable limbo without recourse to law of any sort. Exactly the way they want that. The basic differences between the branches mandate a serious effort at mutual respect. The respect that courts must accord the executive must be reciprocated by the executive's respect for the courts. Too often today, this has not been the case, as calls for impeachment of judges for decisions the executive disfavors and exhortations to disregard court orders sadly illustrate. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be okay with what they do, but the jump to do so is the same as if they try, like this would be trying to impeach Donald Trump because he said the wrong thing one day. You know what I mean? It's a waste of power. It is a waste of resources. And ultimately, if they won, it would be a bastardization of justice. It would be unconstitutional. But see, that's what's happening, and the same difference, guys. They're doing the same thing in reverse. It is in this atmosphere that we are reminded of President Eisenhower's sage example. Putting his, quote, personal opinions aside, Eisenhower honored his inescapable duty to enforce the Supreme Court's decision in Brown versus the Board of Education to desegregate schools, quote, with all deliberate speed. I think that's generally most I want to read. Let me just skim real quick. I didn't highlight it. Now, I'll keep reading. I might as well finish it. We're only one page left. So it continues. This great man expressed his unflagging belief that the very basis of our individual rights and freedom is the certainty that the president of the executive branch and the government will support and ensure the carrying out of the decisions of the federal courts. Yeah, see, that's important. This brings us to the next point in a second about where we go if that's not happening. Indeed, in our late executive's own words, unless the president did so, anarchy would result, which of course, you know why that's not the anarchy does not mean that. Chaos is what they mean. Now the branches come too close to grinding irrevocably against one another in a conflict that promises to diminish both. This is a losing proposition all around, probably by design. Clearly somebody benefits, just not in this country. The judiciary will lose much from the constant intimations of its illegitimacy, to which by dint of custody and detachment we can only sparingly rely. The executive will lose much from the public perception of its lawlessness, which is what they're doing, and all of its attendant contagions. The executive may succeed for a time in weakening the courts, but over time, history will script the tragic gap between what was and all that might have been, and law in time will sign its epitaph. It is, as we have noted, all too possible to see in this case the incipient crisis, but it may present an opportunity as well. We yet cling to the hope that it is not naive to believe our good brethren in the executive branch perceive the rule of law as vital to the American ethos. This case presents their unique chance to vindicate that value and to summon the best that is within us while there is still time. Clearly, they're just giving them an opportunity to be the bigger person or do the right thing. I doubt that's what's going to happen. In some, for the reasons foregoing, we deny the motion for the stay pending appeal. Now imagine pretending like that's them ruling in your favor, which is what they're doing. Sad. Now, one last point on the American part. I probably should have put this first before that. We already showed you a couple examples of lawyers in this country getting sent letters to tell them to leave the country. They act like it was a mistake. Here's another one. Today, in these emails, which have been sent to many people with full legal status, including U.S. citizens and green card holders, it seems like this is a Doge special, which we keep seeing. A rushed use of tech filled with errors that's created fear and confusion, maybe by design. A Tucson lawyer says she received a notice from DHS telling her to leave the country. She's an American citizen that was born in Boston. This is more than one we've seen now, guys. More than one. But point is, green card holders, American people are getting letters to tell them to leave the country, and if they leave, they probably don't care. This is a sloppy, if not designed to be so, problem that's happening. You read for yourself. The government in mass emailing people to tell them to leave the United States, even when they've got citizenship. So, all that in mind, let's go over first the ruling about just people being sent to El Salvador, which is separate than the one about specifically Garcia, but they do overlap. This is Camilo. I'm not familiar with the account. Oh, it looks like a reporter for CBS, simply saying the ACLU obtained the notice that Venezuelan migrants have received, and this is important, to inform them of the government's plan to deport them via specifically the Alien Enemies Act. Now, this is reported as of the 18th. Now, it says the notice was signed by an official today, but the migrant refused to sign it. So you have to understand, as of right now, today, they're doing two things. They're still trying to kick people out of the country without using the Alien Enemies Act, without due process, which is obviously unconstitutional, for the obvious reasons that we don't even know. Maybe they're U.S. citizens for all we know. They're not proving anything. Then we have them still using the Alien Enemies Act, despite the ruling from the Supreme Court saying that they were required, as they should be anywhere else, to give them due process. And neither of those things are happening. So this is signed today. But on top of all of it, what it shows you is the frivolous nature of how they're doing this. The ACLU now says deportations could start tonight. All of this is supposed to sort of be on pause because of the way they're processing all of this. But you can read this for yourself. Warrant of removal to any authorized law officer, as the president has found, that this is what's really important. Because they're using the Alien Enemies Act, people are just acting like he can just apply it to anybody. No, as Bruce Fine said in our conversation, this is applied to, and I brought this up early in this, about a couple weeks ago, around what this act is, and it's applied to a state actor. And that's why they write this. The president has found that Tren de Aragua is perpetuating, attempting, or threatening an invasion or predatory incursion against the territory of the United States, and that Tren de Aragua members are thus alien enemies for the removal under this act. You see how that plays? So that's why they had to declare it a terrorist organization, so they could argue it was a state entity and that they're actually formulating an actual invasion of the country. Like, that's not the same as saying they're coming illegally into the country, guys. They have not presented any evidence that there's a formal invasion taking place with this group. They're making broad, unverified claims. So everything about what they're doing is flimsy and illegal. They don't need all of this. And the reason they tried to patch this together is so they could avoid any legal repercussions for due process for people that aren't actually here legally, who are not criminals, or people speaking bad about Israel. I think it all connects, by the way, but just recognize how important that is. You show me where they're attempting, threatening an invasion of this country. Is there some coordinated effort? I mean, the people they're removing aren't even parts of the gang. Now it says, I am a law enforcement officer authorized to apprehend, restrain, or remove alien enemies. You have been determined to be at least 14 years of age, not a citizen or lawful permanent resident, even though many of their giving these two are those things, a citizen of Venezuela and a member of the gang, Trinidad de Aragua. Accordingly, under this act, you have been determined to be an enemy alien subject to apprehension, restraint, and removal from the country. That's it. So they're not giving them due process, because due process would be where they're able to see their accuser, being able to present their evidence and actually argue that's not true. See, here's how I can prove I'm not a member of that gang. That's due process. This, just because they go, there's a process, that's not due. That is, they're playing games with words. That's due process is a constitutional legal reality. But giving somebody a process is not the same thing. It's embarrassing that people are falling for this, guys. But what they're doing is now we have evidence of what they're giving them. And they refuse to sign. And they're doing it anyway. So here is the Supreme Court ruling that they are currently violating no matter which way they're doing this. So, guys, this is the one they're claiming. This is about just people being sent to El Salvador, Venezuelans, Trinidad de Aragua overlap. Okay, they're supposed to be abiding by this, and they're not. They claim that both of these were in their favor. They were not. Now, please read it. It's 25 pages, but it's thin. It's like this. It's worth your time to understand for how many people are flatly misinterpreting or lying to you about this. Here are just some of the important clips that I think you should see. So you can see this is the same one. It did so. I'll just read it here since it's the top right here. It says 3 weeks ago, the federal government started sending scores of Venezuelans detained in the United States to foreign prisons. It did so without any due process of law. That's just important to understand. That is unconstitutional, no matter what, especially since what we can now prove, again, for the 100th time, is that many of them, if not most of them, are actually here legally or seeking, which is the same conversation. People seeking asylum in the process of citizenship. That's not a legal alien. They're playing you. Here's another one. The government expressly agrees that Trinidad de Aragua members subject to removal under the Alien Enemies Act get judicial review. Reply in support of application to vacate one. It says, quote, it is well established that the Fifth Amendment, and more, by the way, but that's what they cite, entitles aliens to due process of law. And look at that. They even cite Reno versus Flores, where Scalia has spoken about this as a conservative judge. Guys, it's obvious. It's in the Supreme Court ruling, and they know this. And people are screaming the opposite out there, that they are entitled due process under law, whether Alien Enemies Act or not. And that's the point, is in this ruling, they made a clear point to say they have to, as it says below that. So the detainees are entitled to notice and opportunity to be heard appropriate to the nature of the case. That's another ruling from another court case. More specifically in the context, AEA detainees must receive notice after the date of this order that they are subject to removal under the Act. The notice must be afforded within a reasonable time and in such a manner as will allow them to actually seek habeas relief in the proper venue before, so they can present evidence, they can challenge the claim, guys. So they're simply telling you, you're required to do that, and they're still not doing that. So I'll just make that clear. This is an example of them using the Alien Enemies Act. I don't know why I keep mixing that up. The point is, they're not giving due process, and that's verified right in front of you. And we know that already, though. Here's one more. Please read it. There's a lot of good stuff in here, important stuff, rather. The implication of the government's position is that not only non-citizens, but also United States citizens could be taken off the streets, forced into planes, and confined to foreign prisons with no opportunity for redress if judicial review is denied unlawfully before removal. History is no stranger to such lawless regimes, but this nation's system of laws is designed to prevent, not enable their rise. Does that sound like one ruling that they could do what they want? It did not. And they're lying to you about it. Please read this stuff. Now, we're going to go to the next one in a second and read that one too. Before we get there, Richard points this out, and we talked about this, I think it was on the 16th, but I want to reiterate this. The New York Times broke this down and looked into the original 238 names that they shipped to El Salvador, right? For the gang members they claimed. The worst of the worst, they said, rapists and terrorists. Remember that? They lied to you, guys, and you can easily prove it from even what we already showed you. But we already, and this is what we already pointed out before, but to reiterate, they found the evidence that only 32 of them committed what they called serious crimes. And you can read it. Some of these aren't, that's not what they're claiming. But it says the rest appear to be have minor infractions or no criminal record at all, or no documented gang ties. Even the 32 serious crimes, no one's proven in any way that they're actually gang members. Again, it would not surprise me. I'd almost find it stupid for them to not at least find some of them to hide the rest of what they're doing. As he writes, this is simply a war crime. It's obvious what's happening here, guys, and you can prove this. We already did. I've gone over many of them on this show alone. They know what they're doing. You have to ask how this in any way benefits the American agenda or the Republican agenda. It's obviously for something else. And it could just be the authoritarian control that they want to be able to just do what they want, but clearly there's an interest for a foreign power here. So most of them were not, I think, quite frankly, well, none of them have proven to be gang members at all. At best, 32 of them have serious crimes, and of the vast majority of them aren't gang members, aren't even maybe traffic tickets at best. Now, on April 17th, this is just adds to that point. One of the Venezuelans who Cristian known tried to render to El Salvador's slave prison. You know, where she stood in front of them and said they're all rapists and murderers, even though we can prove most of them are not. And this person managed to avoid removal. I'm not sure exactly how. Was able to make it to an immigration court. And guess what? The government gave zero evidence of the gang membership and basically got removed. Like removed for the process, did not get deported. So however this person, as Aaron writes, this is stunning. One of the plaintiffs in the Alien Enemies Act case who did get taken off the plane had a court hearing just 48 hours later, and ICE didn't even offer one piece of evidence that he was part of the gang, and he never got deported again. If he wouldn't, he would have been sent to El Salvador, and we never would have seen him again, and they would have been calling him a rapist and a terrorist like everybody else. The point is, they got confronted with that moment where they could have, and they didn't have anything because they don't have anything, guys. The evidence has been clear from the very beginning. This is so incredibly awful and chilling. This is alarming as hell. I just can't stress to you enough. This is one of those moments where, I'm always so afraid in the past. Like, I don't want to be hyperbolic. I don't want to scare anybody. Like, if you're not scared about this, you're not paying attention. And I'm not trying to scare anybody. What I'm saying is that this is a real thing that's happening. It's whether it's even just the idea of sending people who are here on green cards to foreign prisons to which they rot in for the rest of their lives. How is that not chilling? And the worst part for me, like with Israel, not just that they're committing genocide, but they stand there with a smile and tell you they're saving everybody. That's what kills me about the Cristian Gnomes and Pam Bond. Well, they'll just yell down at you like you're the one not supporting their attack. We're going after rapists and murderers. And what we're talking about is a guy with no criminal record who's got a family who's scared about him being gone. It kills me more than anything. So Aaron points out that according to, and this is as of and this has been going up rapidly, by the way, as of the 16th, 1,300 student visas have been revoked. 1,300. A number which rises daily, he says. And like Mr. Onda, most appear to be people with speeding tickets and other incredibly minor enforcement interactions. You can read it for yourself. The evidence is undeniable. And they're not even claiming otherwise, guys. Like even with the case of Khalil, which everyone wants to put behind him because it's one of the most obvious and it was how it started, they admitted it was because of his ideas. That's the best they can do. Rubio put it in court, and then yet they stand up and scream, he's an illegal alien. No, he wasn't. He's a criminal. No, he wasn't. He sports a mask. No, he doesn't. They just keep yelling the narratives, then people keep falling for it, at least some. The idea here is so wild to me. 1,300 students. Now overlap that with what they're claiming, right? They want you to believe we've gotten rid of thousands of evil terrorists. They're raping grandmothers, right? Dominic Trippi points out ICE has now said they've arrested 1,000 illegal aliens. Interesting, right? So over here, you've got the information about over 1,300 of people that are, traffic tickets, many of them, the conversation we're having. But then they frame it over here from the Republican side of this, not him, but just the conversation of that side, saying we've gotten rid of all these these terrorists. Well, the reality is you can actually go through the information and see that most of these people are people that are, if even breaking the law at all, barely. And that's, fine. If the people, as I've said from the beginning, if they're here illegally, that is still a crime. But how many of those people were legally here? How many people were seeking asylum, looking to get citizenship, right? You have to realize what we're talking about here are student visas that have been revoked because of some kind of small thing. And then they go over here and say, illegal aliens have been deported. Those are the same numbers we're talking about. So you're being played if you think they're going after bad guys, as opposed to people that are inconvenient for the power structure or speaking about Israel. Same conversation. And as Andrew rightly puts out, how about the 3,000 missing kids, right? How about the Epstein list? How about everything else you promised? Nope, we're going after people that hate Israel. Sad. Now, the Supreme Court has said people must be given enough time as to allow them to actually seek habeas relief. We just read it directly from the Supreme Court ruling, right? ICE, and this is as of the 18th, is loading people onto buses right now. This was earlier today. Not even 24 hours after giving notice. So they're not doing it, is the point. They're blatantly disregarding Supreme Court rulings, and this is important. If this goes forward, the first clear moment of Supreme Court defiance is here. Now, we had this conversation, and I'm going to be continually joining them to discuss this. And this is with Jeffrey from BitChute and Bruce Fine, formerly of the Reagan administration, who is very, very well knowledgeable about this, of constitutional law, of law in general. And I find it to be a very important conversation. Now, we don't all agree on everything. The point is that what we're discussing is largely has been at least this general topic. And I think it's very important to understand. And Bruce brought up a very important point about this, right? So if we get to this point, which is, I think, where we are right now, where basically we come to the point to where, and we'll get to the potential of being in contempt, where they disregard Supreme Court rulings, right? So remember, Trump said, I love Supreme Court. I'll do whatever they say. And then they ruled against him and he said no and did something else. So basically wanted you to hear that soundbite so you pretend that's the case and then went another direction and gave you a narrative to explain it away. He lied to you is the point. He lied and then did what he wanted, just like Biden or all the rest of them. So the important part is that now we're in a situation where we're now coming to that head where he's been ordered by the Supreme Court and he said no. So the only thing that can happen right there is for Congress to try to take action. Begin articles of impeachment. You're directly violating that. This is, if that's not honored, then the system doesn't exist. And so the point is that if he then does nothing and they try to impeach him, then that will be the system correcting itself. Now, if Congress does nothing, what does that mean? I mean, it's a pretty chilling reality. Is that means that going forward, that we don't live in the country we think we do, because that's the end right there. Nothing else will happen. Then Trump can just disregard whatever Supreme Court rulings come or whatever judges say, because there's no mechanism through which you can actually stop or force them to do it, because that's how that would work. Congress has abdicated its power a long time ago, guys. I think it's because they've been completely bought off and compromised 75 different ways. But we're there right now. Now, I'm not trying to overhype this point. I mean, you really think about that. The whole check and balance of this system is the only game we play with to pretend that we actually have influence on this outcome. Now, I don't agree that's how it works, but I do think if it was reality, then that would make sense to me. And I do think there's some, they do have to respect it in some way because they want us to believe this works. But whether I'm wrong, my point is that's probably not important to include today. Just pretend I'm wrong. The reality is that that's how we're supposed to believe it works. So if we come to that point and Trump, whether Biden or Trump or anybody else, if the U.S. government just goes, we don't care what you think. Going past that, same point. We just don't have any mechanism through which to change it. So effectively, we're either finding out for the first time that through this administration, showing that we're now no longer what we thought we were, or they're exposing to us that we never were. Because it's just, if you think about it, there's no other moment in, action through which that we can actually change this to go in the direction, in line with the Constitution. But my point's always been the same. As you go back, plenty of different examples we can show that we've already gone away from the Constitution. This is just the most chilling and obvious example that I think is meant to be seen. It's a good conversation. You can listen to it. Now, here's what somebody says in this regard. Now, here's the point from before. And I think I'm going to go over this in a second. Or maybe not. Maybe I moved it over here. Anyway, this is the problem. Is that we can go over this ruling, which is right here, and show you exactly what they say, which is that this is lawless, or that basically showing that they were wrong. And yet you can have people like Miller in this clip, or Rubio, or Pam Bondi scream that they won somehow. They're wrong. They're lying, guys, and it's easily proven. The problem is that then you get people like Chris Murphy who come out and say that. I shouldn't even say it's the problem. The problem is the people that use that to lie to themselves and say a court order that he had to stay in the United States. Supreme Court ruled 9-0. He was illegally removed. They did. I just read it. Or actually, excuse me, that was the other one. Same point, though. I'll read this next. And Trump is pretending he won. That's what's happening. The problem is that people who are Republicans, who are blinded by partisanship, will go, Chris is a dumb Democrat. So that means he's lying. And ignore that case. It's lazy reverse psychology, and it's working for some people. I was saying this before Chris or anybody else came out and said that. I show in the context of like the government. Plenty of other independent media were probably making the same point even before me. Chris says, this is a litmus test. It looks insignificant. Mark my words. Today, our republic was lost. If the House doesn't bring bipartisan articles of impeachment, we have voted the last time in the United States. Now, I argue that's not going to be the last time we vote. I don't think our vote translates now. So they're sure as hell going to keep you going through the motions as long as they, I mean, that's a good way to think about it, by the way. Let's just say for sake of conversation, tomorrow, let's just say the Democrats are in power and suddenly they take action that completely destroys, that proves that we don't actually vote for them. But they keep the process going. So people pretend it goes forward. And you're going, guys, your vote doesn't even matter. And the people still keep voting and tell you you're wrong for not. Guess what? That's where we already are. And I've been doing that for a long time. At least consider that, guys. You can see you could end up in a world where your vote has been changed or the process has been broken, but they keep you doing it because they want you to think you're in charge, right? Yeah. Consider that's what's been going on for a long time. The point he's making is not about some partisan thing. It's a larger discussion. Whether it's a Democrat in power or not, if we come to the point to where the Supreme Court is being disregarded and nobody's actually trying to force the reality, then we have lost what we think we had. It's a nonpartisan point, and it's very simple. The problem is, look at this guy, says, our republic was lost because we deported MS-13 gang members. Calm down, Nancy. Again, bot or a very dumb person. I don't know. The sad thing is, he's not a member of the gang. And the reality is whether you're allowing somebody to undermine the Constitution for your petty grievances. Or this person says, such an uneducated, stupid C-U-C-K. Keep watching CNN. You see how that works? You don't even know whether the person's making an argument that's rooted in law, but because it's against your chosen ideologue, you're a Democrat. People call me a Democrat all the time for making points that are nonpartisan. Or people during COVID called me a Republican for the same reason, because we're blind. Now, here's Benny Johnson going, the DOJ releases documents from Homeland Security. No, what we have, by the way, is a screenshot that's been circulated, which is rooted in, here's what's crazy about this. As best I can tell, this is the same information that came from the policeman that we've talked about in the past. It's already been out there. It's already the same thing. But because Johnson decides to claim it's something new, it's been released, and gives you a screenshot, all of the moron followers jump, oh, we knew it, you're lying. How about we take a look at the document real quick? So what he says is, releases documents, and he gives you one screenshot. So wonder where the other plural documents are, showing the criminal alien who was deported is, in fact, MS-13 terrorist. Big kick in the face to the fake news. Okay, well, let's just look first. Let's see what this says. Let's look through it in depth, okay? Okay, so far, I see Maria Salvatrucha 13. I see active member. That's MS-13, by the way. That's the gang name. Gang criteria, dress, frequent gang. Okay, I don't see anything so far. Now it says approximately Detective blank. Parking lot of Home Depot. Yep, we know how this goes. That's 2019. That's where he was picked up in Home Depot and then not charged with a crime and released, and they continue to pretend he's a gang member. Approach the individual. Remember, the point here is that they went up to this discussion as a large, it wasn't about him. It was about investigating MS-13 activity. And so they apprehended a lot of people. It says they approached the individuals. 2 of the individuals reached into their waistbands and discarded several unknown items. All 4 were stopped. See how that works? Under by this officer, immediately recognized one of them, not this Ramiro, different person. 2 small plastic bottles. Okay. Members of the Prince George County gang, Fernando Ramiro, sense of gang. Okay. So far, nothing. Gang member with the Sailor Clique. Okay, the whole thing so far about the one that they identified, Ramiro. Officers also interviewed Jose Guillermo Dominguez, okay? During the interview, officers observed tattoos of skulls. Officers know these kind of tattoos are indicative of the Hispanic gang culture. The tattoo is meant to represent their, okay, so it's a gang, or tattoo, they claim. No, that doesn't prove someone's a gang member. Okay, so far, and then it says ranking members that represent MS-13, Jose Guillermo Dominguez. Okay. And then way at the bottom, it says officers then interviewed Kilmore Armando Garcia during the interview officers. Oh, weird. Then it just blanks out. Funny how he didn't include the next page, which goes on to make the case that these people were simply present and not actually part of the gang. And they point to this and go, MS-13, we knew it. Do you not realize how embarrassingly stupid that is? Guys, this is not what it looks like, okay? Show me subject has been identified as a member of the gang, okay? They're talking about people being present. I'm going to make this very clear for you, okay? All you have are association claims coming primarily from the one guy that we've already talked about, who, by the way, was charged with the crime right after this, which doesn't invalidate what he might have said. The point is, no case was ever brought. He went forward and was given asylum from a foreign country. There's no evidence other than this one example, and that's all they have. You realize they're calling him a human trafficker right now, right? Okay. So read through this for yourself. The point is, all of this is about the people that were around him and that he was simply there. Now, you could argue that means he's guilty if you just want to jump to conclusions about anything. So that means you're guilty simply by standing next to somebody who might be something you don't know about. And on top of that, recognize that the idea is simply that all of them are gang members because the government says so. Here's what's important. Eat the Rich says, hey, Grok, is there any definitive evidence that Kilmore Garcia is MS-13? This is Grok, by the way. It says there's no definitive evidence Kilmore Garcia is MS-13. And this is what I just went over in those fuzzy documents he wants to make you pretend you think, make you assume about. Claims stem from unadjudicated 2019 immigration hearings. That's what Bondi keeps pointing at. And a questionable police report, which we were just pointing to. But no charges or convictions exist. You see how they're playing you? Because the game is, he was there, the investigation was going on, we don't give you the context of how it went forward, and because he was simply present, and I'll show you the cop who made the argument that he was because he was there. That's all that's happening. His legal team and family deny the gang ties, and judges have questioned the allegations. The Trump administration's claims lack public proof and may be politically driven. That's Grok. Not that that should make it the truth, but it just shows you this is even what Elon could be tampering with. That's what you get. Okay, then this person goes, Grok, what about the information just released by the AG? Is that not on your system yet? Hence, you're still saying old information? You see how they're trying to feed it to say what they want. Here's what it says. The information released by AG likely refers to the DHS statement on April 14, 2025. It does, claiming Kilmore Garcia's MS-13 member. However, no new conclusive evidence was provided. They simply pointed to the old thing and said something new. It's nothing new. Fact-checking sources and legal analysts question these claims, citing a questionable 2019 police report. It all stems back to that. Gee, like we've been telling you from the beginning. No charges, no convictions. My system is up to date. As of April 16, 2025, the evidence still does not definitively prove Garcia's gang affiliation. And this person simply says, where was it? Grok owns the MAGA cult morons again. I think it's funny. I mean, guys, ask somebody else. Don't ask an AI. Look into it for yourself. So, which begs the question, does Benny Johnson know that? And is he just lying to you? Or does he not care at all and just goes along with whatever the Team Sport Republican narrative is because that's what gets his paycheck signed? You tell me. He's wrong, by the way. He's not, and that's not what that shows you. How crazy is that? So at the end of the day, it stems to the same report that we've already talked about from 2019. No charges, no convictions. He was released. Nothing happened. And of course, the main part, which I'll just go to now, is this stems to an example from and we've already gone over all this. So it's so frustrating we have to repeat all of this. Actually, I don't want to go into all that right now. I want to go over let's just do it real quick. So I want to go into the actual Supreme Court ruling, but that's going to pull me away from this exact point we're making. So here, the point is the police officer who was involved with that, okay, was arrested right after this. The Maryland police officer who formally arrested Garcia, and that was remember, no charges, no convictions, because there was no evidence to back it up. in 2019, when he was detained for the first time, was subsequently suspended from the force for serious transgressions, giving confidential information about a case to a sex worker. The officer, apparently a senior detective on Garcia's case in 2019, Ivan Mendez, according to that was one cited that was the one on that paper, who is also a member of his current legal team. Mendez was subsequently indicted for his offense, pleaded guilty, and received probation. So Greg is simply saying the cop who initially arrested him was subsequently suspended and indicted for serious professional misconduct. Now that doesn't prove that doesn't make that this, just like the right now is claiming, which we'll get to next, that the one thing is some document circulating, or what you can see on his fingers, by the way. Where is that? Sorry, I'm trying to jump ahead. We'll come to it. Basically, this document where somebody's claiming he beat his wife or something. And who knows? Wouldn't surprise me. So now suddenly, if you have a domestic abuse problem, now you're a gang member because we say so. The laziness of this is insane. And all it shows you is the kind of mission creep. Now we're just trying to muddy the waters with his reputation because he's not Father of the Year. I just can't believe Americans in any context will be okay with this. You're being convinced to undermine what you believe in because you want to be, because Trump says so. Because of partisan ideology. Now, I'll come back to it. I'll go through all this. I just want to make sure you saw that. So the case here is interesting because the evidence already shows you that there was no charges, no convictions. But on top of that, the guy who wrote this out, the person they're pointing to as the inside, that guy was removed for misconduct. So as I said, that's just as the right is trying to do now, but say, well, he beat his wife, therefore it's okay. This all lines up, is the same in reverse. I wouldn't do that. The fact that the cop has some kind of transgression does not then verify that he was lying. But the point is, we already know there was no crime, there was no charge, and the cop turns out to be corrupt. That has to matter. But not to Benny Johnson, apparently. Now, here's the Supreme Court ruling in regard to Garcia specifically. Okay? Again, read it. It's only 4 pages long. I mean, maybe we should just read it all the way through. I feel like it's important. I had a few shots. Where are we at right now? We're almost 3 hours. Here, let me read through it real quick. That's not that long. Let's just read that. So I have the screenshots in case you missed something. They're important, but let me read this. March 15, 2025, the United States removed Kilmore Garcia. I always try to skip it. Abrego Garcia from the United States to El Salvador, where he is currently detained in the Center for Terrorism Confinement, CCOT. The United States acknowledges that Garcia was subject to a withholding order forbidding his removal to El Salvador, and that the removal in El Salvador was therefore illegal. They've admitted all that. And on top of that, that it was for political persecution, not some gang activity they keep trying to claim. Like as if he's going to be killed by the other gang. It's not what they're claiming. That's the cartoonish thing they're saying in front of people that don't understand the situation. The United States represents that the removal to El Salvador was the result of an administrative error. The United States alleges, however, that Garcia has been found to be a member of the gang MS-13, a designated foreign terrorist organization, that his return to the United States would pose a threat to the public. That's how they play that. They keep claiming he's a terrorist and we can't bring him back because he would hurt people, but that's not even what they're saying publicly. It's like if you've never started, you haven't proven anything, you can't keep pointing to what you said there to prove the next thing you're saying. But it goes, Garcia responds that he is not a member of MS-13 and that he's lived safely in the United States with his family for a decade, which he has, and has never been charged with a crime, which he has not. On Friday, April 4th, the United States District Court for the District of Maryland entered an order directing the government to, quote, facilitate and effectuate the return of Garcia to the United States by no later than 11:59 on April 7th. On the morning of April 7th, the United States filed they waited until the 7th to do that on purpose, filed its application to vacate District Court's order. The Chief Justice entered an administrative stay and subsequently referred the application to the court. The application is granted in part and denied in part. See, this is what they're trying to pretend that means they won. All they did was grant the part that was removal of the effectuate aspect. And I'll keep reading. It's very clear. They're just blatantly lying to everybody. Remember, this is the one that Miller and the White House and everybody else kept screaming was them winning this case. It says in part, so application is granted in part, denied in part, subject to the direction of this order. Due to the administrative stay issued by the Chief Justice, the deadline imposed by the District Court has now passed. To that extent, the government's emergency application is effectively granted in part, that's the part about removing effectuate, and the deadline in the challenged order is no longer effective because they're past it, obviously. The rest of the district court's order remains in effect. That enough right there. It shows you, but requires clarification on remand. The order properly requires the government to, quote, facilitate his release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that this case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. That seems pretty obviously clear. The intended scope of the term effectuate in the district court's order is, however, unclear and may exceed the district court's authority. We already read this before. The district court should clarify its directive with due regard for the title deference owed to the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs. For its part, the government should be prepared to share what it can concerning the steps it's taken and the prospect of further steps, which we just read to you on the follow-up, makes clear that they were like, you're not doing that. We ordered you to give us your steps, not just stand back and wait. The order henceforth entered the Chief Justice is vacated. So the follow-up already shows you on top of that that they are what they pretend this means. It does not. Statement of Justice Sotomayor, with whom Justice Kagan and Justice Jackson join. The United States government arrested Garcia in Maryland and flew him to a terrorism confinement center in El Salvador, where he has been detained for 26 days and counting. To this day, the government has cited no basis in law for Garcia's warrantless arrest, his removal to El Salvador, or his confinement in the prison, nor could it. The government remains bound by the immigration judge's 2019 order, clear, expressly prohibiting Garcia's removal to El Salvador because he faced a clear probability of future persecution. Like, let's be clear again. You think persecution means from gang violence? Persecution, that's government. And demonstrated that El Salvador authorities were and would be unable and unwilling to protect him, obviously. Now, it says the government has not challenged the validity to that order. Instead of hastening to correct its egregious error, clearly citing again that it was an error, they made a mistake, or they did it on purpose, the government dismissed it as an oversight. The government now requests an order from the court permitting it to leave Garcia, a husband and a father without a criminal record, in a concentration camp that I'm adding, is what it is, for no reason recognized by the law. Does that sound like winning? The only argument the government offers in support of its request that United States courts cannot grant relief once a deportee crosses the border is plainly wrong. You listening, Stephen Miller? He knows he's lying is the point. The government, he's trying to play dumb people. So think about what that means if you've been played by that. He thinks you're stupid. The government's argument, moreover, implies that it could deport and incarcerate any person, including U.S. citizens, without legal consequence, so long as it does so before a court can intervene. That's been every ruling now, from the one about the general Venezuelans being sent to Garcia specifically, to the follow-up ruling. Everyone seems to be aware of this in the judicial system. That's the reality, guys. And so that's why right now they're pushing back, and the Congress is showing itself to be inept, to be compromised. That view refutes itself, because every factor governing requests for equitable relief manifestly weighs against the government. Again, they're citing rulings across this whole thing. I would have declined to intervene in this litigation and denied the application in full. Nevertheless, I agree with the court's order that the proper remedy is to provide Garcia with all the process to which he would have been entitled had he not been unlawfully removed to El Salvador. That means the government must comply with its obligation to provide Garcia with due process of law. How do you misunderstand that? So that means, Stephen Miller, that you just win and leave him there? You're a very dishonest, manipulative person, I argue, working for a foreign government. How else will you misunderstand that? It says, including notice and opportunity to be heard in any future proceedings. Reno versus Flores, right there. It must also comply with its obligations under the Convention Against Torture, which they're not, because they're torturing people over there. It's been called out by human rights groups. Federal law governing detention and removal of immigrants continues, of course, to be binding as well. See, that's an important point to consider. There's laws in this country binding how it can happen to people they deal with. So when they send them to a foreign terrorist country, or an authoritarian country with no legal reality, with no civil rights, with no process, that violates your U.S. law in another way. They don't care. It says requiring a warrant before a non-citizen may be arrested and detained pending decision on removal. They're just citing another case, guys. Another U.S. law. You are required to give them process, due process, constitutional rights. It says, and the government must provide adequate notice and promptly arrange an initial informal interview. They're not doing that right now. To afford the alien an opportunity to respond to the reasons for the revocation stated in the notification. Moreover, it has been the government's own well-established policy to facilitate alien returns to the United States if the presence is necessary for continued administrative removal proceedings. There's no pushback. That's happened many times in the past. So this game they play where it undermines executive authority, they're just playing on ignorance, guys. It says, especially in cases where a non-citizen has been removed pending immigration proceedings. It finishes by saying, in the proceedings on remand, the district court should continue to ensure the government lives up to its obligations to follow the law. Imagine framing that as winning this case in the way that you claim it's going. How dishonest, how stupid people must be. Blindly supportive. Well, he writes, this is Bondi. We already played this, by the way. Now, we've been long, so I'm not going to play it. This is where she basically says, yeah, if we brought him back, it would just be a little more paperwork. Literally brushing over due process. As Aaron says, if Mr. Abrego Garcia is returned as requested by the Supreme Court, as required, I should say that's what he wrote, required, then ICE has to go through a process to revoke his withholding of removal. Like the argument being that we'd have to remove the original ruling that he's not allowed to go to El Salvador or send him somewhere else. But all of it will require due process. They know that. They don't have the evidence because they can't prove what they claim he is. So it says they'll have to prove a judge conditions have changed. He'd then be able to seek protection again. Now, all that's on top, like you said, due process. And this person just writes, I can't believe Attorney General, the Attorney General of the United States just said that all will happen is we'll have to give him, if we give him back, is we'll be given due process. Like that's something to brush over. These are the people in charge of this country, guys. That has to be pretty scary. Now here is what Leavitt said. Now we just went through the court documents. We went through what the governments are saying. Has anybody seen any allegation of human trafficking anywhere? It doesn't exist because they're not even claiming that. But yet here they are continuing to cite this in front of people. As Aaron says, as far as I can tell, this claim of human trafficking was first put forward by Leavitt herself, which I guarantee came from the Trump administration. No government attorney has ever made such an allegation, nor has any government official ever provided any evidence to suggest it, yet they keep claiming this. The Benny Johnsons of the world keep saying it. Imagine being his family, and he's an innocent person, he's not part of this gang, who's suffering in a foreign prison, and they just keep lining it on top of a terrorist, a human trafficker. How are we allowing this?
Abrego Garcia was a foreign terrorist.
Nope.
He is an MS-13 gang member.
Nope.
He was engaged in human trafficking.
Nope.
He illegally came into our country.
Nope.
And so
every single one of those claims are false, guys. Every single one of them. Now, I will walk it back in regard to whether originally, the point is, when he was dealt with in this conversation, he was here legally. And if you think somebody coming in, and on top of that, realize that in many of these cases, we've already shown you are people that are seeking that process. But fine, let's just say back in 2018, you came into this country illegally. Then charge him with a crime and deport him to the normal process. The idea that why would you have to manufacture all of these claims? Because they're trying to do something different. I'm wondering what the bigger connection is here. Genuinely. If we dig through their social media, will we find claims about Palestine or Israel? Is there something more going on here? Is there something that El Salvador wanted from this man? Like, how does it possibly make sense that they would just lie this blatantly, knowing we could all see through it?
deporting him back to El Salvador was always going to be the end result. There is never going to be...
Which is the one thing that's illegal in this conversation, other than the constitutional due process discussion, is that the court ruled he was not allowed to go back to El Salvador, in particular, because of political persecution from the clearly despotic country. So that's the only thing, they're just skipping right over the top.
A world in which this is an individual who's going to live a peaceful life in Maryland because he is a foreign terrorist.
He was 10 years with a family, no criminal record. But she wants you to believe that's not possible because he's a terrorist, which he wasn't, and they can prove, on and on and on. Like, think about continuing to cycle through this. You have the evidence that he lived there for 10 years with his family. No crimes.
an MS-13 gang member. Not only have we confirmed that, President Bukele yesterday in the Oval Office confirmed that as well.
Oh, okay. So the guy that your partner in crime just reiterates what you said out loud, therefore that confirms it. This is the evidence they want you to take face value. What leaders of government say. That should feel pretty uncomfortable for those of you pretending to fight the deep state, the rebels, as you're just blindly regurgitating power structures claims.
So he went back to his home country where he will face consequences for his gang affiliation and his engagement in human trafficking. I'm not sure what is so difficult about this for everyone in the media to understand.
Evidence. Evidence, leave it. That's what we understand. Give me the evidence. Your statements of the claims repeated are not evidence. The insane reality. Can you imagine what will happen if they somehow get this person back and at the end the evidence does get presented in a very clear, seen way that this is not the case? Or how about just, we already did that, quite frankly. How about just the human trafficking claim she keeps screaming? What happens if you can't prove that? Will she be held accountable for slander? Of course not. But they should be. God only knows what's happening to these innocent people. And I mean innocent people who are here legally in many cases, who are struggling in El Salvador because this monster in front of you is screaming that they deserve what they get. You deserve what you get, leave it. And hopefully that comes around.
And it's appalling, truly appalling, that there has been so much time covering this alleged human trafficker and this
alleged. Oops, that was a mistake, wasn't it? You didn't mean to say that.
gang member, MS-13 gang member. It's truly.
Yeah, she's struggling, okay? Because all you have is righteous indignation when everyone knows you're lying. That's why this position has got to be the worst thing in the world. I say it every time. As far as I can tell, he says the claim of human trafficking was put forward by her first. There is zero evidence. Let me say that again. Zero evidence. They're not even claiming that in court. Now, here it is again. This is from Homeland Security. Towing the line, doing the exact same thing.
What really matters to Americans is that this MS-13 gang member, who unfortunately, Jay, you and a lot of your colleagues have called a Maryland man, when in reality,
I'm going to stop you there. What is your evidence,
member.
Tricia? Wait, I got to stop you there. What's your evidence that he's in MS-13?
So here's what's crazy about this. You know, you go on Fox and OAN and the rest of them, and there's zero pushback about floating those claims. But then, of course, when they go on the Democrat channels, they stop and go, what's the evidence? And of course, that gives people on the right, they're, oh, we all see, they don't understand, and ignore it, which I'm convinced is a small minority right now, but it's the ones screaming the loudest at the top of the conversation. But just because ABC or CNN finally do the right thing in this moment does not mean it's not the right thing. Asking for evidence of a claim like that is what we should all be doing. Of course, I don't believe ABC or CNN care at all about the outcome or the evidence. They just are using this to make political points, in my opinion. Or I'm jaded. The point is, because they do it does not make it wrong. They're using that to convince you that it is.
Well, there's actually been 2 separate immigration judges, Jay, who have confirmed and ruled that he is a member of MS-13.
Nope.
That as well.
Not true.
We have intelligence
it was brought up in deportation
they sure did,
proceedings,
Jay.
but what's the evidence that was brought up in those deportation proceedings that he's in MS-13?
And they dismissed his appeal, Jay. I can do this all day, Jay. He is a member of MS-13. I don't think you'd want to be his neighbor, Jay. It's
the same exact thing they keep saying. They have talking points. If he was your neighbor, you'd move right away. That's what Miller said, right? He's not father of the year. They all keep repeating. It's just blind repetition. What she just said is flatly a lie, whether she knows it or not. And what he tried to say behind her, but see, why wouldn't he keep pushing that point? It's what we just went over. No, that's not what happened. But he just lets it go for the most part.
Sure wouldn't, and I don't think many Americans watching would want to be this individual's neighbor. He has been involved in human trafficking. He's been involved in labor trafficking, and he should not be in this country.
So the argument is you wouldn't want to be next to him. What does that have to do with anything? How is that a legal argument? There's no evidence to back up anything she just said.
So whether he's in an El Salvadorian jail or a U.S. detention facility, I am so very glad, as are millions of Americans, that he is off of U.S. streets. Because remember, Jay, who is MS-13? They maim, they rape.
Oh, so yes, now we lurch into, look at all the bad things they did. That means he's a bad guy because you claim something you can't prove. That is guilt by association. That is mission creep, or whatever you want to call it. That's what they keep doing. As we'll show you in a second, as this continues to fall apart, where they go, well, maybe he's not a terrorist, but he sure is a bad guy. And then, but look, his knuckles have weird tattoos. Now how we know they are flailing right now, because I get the sense this is not going to go in their favor and it's going to be really bad. Or they just stand their ground and completely destroy this country.
They kill Americans for sport, and the American people are done with it. They said so on November 5th, 2024.
Of course, because the fake election means we get to do whatever we want, and you all support us whether you want to or not. The sad part about this is, of course, we're talking about, different gang activity, the cartels. If you understand MS-13 or the inner workings of the cartel dynamic, then you already understand how much the Israeli agenda is intertwined with that, or U.S. government intelligence is overlapped with these very conversations. But we won't get into all that because that only muddies the waters. At the end of the day, it's obvious to see these things in and of themselves are not what they appear to be. But that is irrelevant because these people are not even part of that. So it's like the manufacturing your thing and then pretending you're part of that thing. It's very easy to do as long as you've got a rabid following of people that will shout anybody down for caring about what we should. Whether it's a killer or a jaywalker, I care that you have rights. It's just sad. But so again, back to the original point, why would he not push back? I think there's a reason for that. I think this is an agenda. Now, as Aaron's pointing out, so prove it. Present any evidence that he's part of MS-13 that's not the tainted police informant stuff from 2019. Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a guy who was fired for being a corrupt cop who put on this thing that he was connected, and that's the only thing anybody's ever gotten. There's nothing, and that's why he was released. That's why even Grok told you there is no evidence. Everybody since then has said this is baseless. That's why he wasn't in jail. 6 years ago, that's what we're talking about. He says, you keep making these claims, but the moment you have to show them in court, you refuse, which they've been doing. You're the federal government. Show us the evidence. Now, that's about the broad points. The part of human trafficking that she just said 3 times, that's nowhere. That's the craziest part about it, is I think they're aware that they're lying about all of it, so why not just add crazy things that we're not even claiming to get people online saying that? I don't even think she knows that. She does not seem like somebody who's in the know, quite frankly. She's somebody that's going to be thrown under the bus when it comes around. He goes on to say, you have the power of the federal government behind you. Get the evidence and make it public. You haven't had any problem doing that for other people. You've given their names, their crimes, their faces, their tattoos. Prove it. Let's make sure this was, same one. Then he goes on to say, you know what happened when Judge Zenas looked at the evidence the Trump administration gave her about Garcia? She made it clear that the evidence was not there, and there was no proof that he was part of MS-13, as we already showed you. No evidence before the court connects Garcia to any other criminal organization. Even the recent rulings we just showed you made it clear that that was at best up in the air. Wouldn't they have given the evidence to the court if they had it? He says, we know that evidence the judge reviewed in 2019, hearsay or hearsay on hearsay, a document filled out by a detective suspended weeks later for selling secrets, which claimed an unknown confidential informant said he was MS-13. That's what it comes from. See, I didn't say that today, but we went over that the first time. It's secondary information from an informant for that person that they wrote down. Again, all of this is why even Grok can discern that there's no evidence, and that's why it was all put away. It says the immigration judge in 2019 didn't know the context behind the gang worksheet. With what we now know in real court, its evidentiary value is completely nil. So, referring to her speaking in the video, if you have any proof, show it. This is also, you know what else you should prove? That he's connected to human trafficking. A very serious accusation you're making publicly without giving any evidence. Neither DHS, DOJ has ever suggested to a judge or immigration or federal that he's human trafficking. Here are the facts. Garcia lived here for 14 years. He's never been charged with a crime. He's married to a U.S. citizen, and they have 3 kids. Now, as far as I understand it, that makes you a U.S. citizen. The only country it was illegal to deport him to was El Salvador. That was the only one. He was deported to El Salvador, they claim by mistake. Now, down here, it says, update, Bondi released what she claimed was new evidence. We already pointed to that. That's what Grok just told you was just regurgitated information. And it was nothing but the tainted 2019 worksheet, which, by the way, we've already been talking about. This is not new, guys. And all you get is this weird cycle where suddenly the same Benny Johnsons of the world cite the same dumb thing. It repeats back around again with a different narrative, and we have to shout it back. That's why I'm frustrated by this. We went over this the first time this came out. It says, so they really don't have anything from the last 6 years, not a single piece of new evidence, but the word of a disgraced cop. That's the best they can do, guys. Oh, and here, this is, again, same point. So this person asking for evidence, that goes, here you go, and literally cites the exact same thing. The statement made by the same thing, the one group, the one cop, this informant that turned out to be completely baseless, no charges released, nothing. You have to understand how insane it is that they just keep jumping down this. That means to me that they're desperate because they don't want to get charged for something, or this is for some other agenda, and we don't even understand yet. Like, this is important that they rush this out. I don't know. As he says, that's literally the same thing we just talked about. You can read it for yourself. Oh, and this is just the same. I included that at the end for the information about that cop background. If you want to look into it, we went over this more. I mean, the Daily Mail wrote an entire article about this. How this cop, I mean, it's all out there for you if you just can ignore the partisan screaming. Now here, as of the 17th, Representative Dan Miser says maybe he's not a terrorist, but he's potential terrorist. See how they start to water this down as it gets more and more ridiculous.
And so he gets deported. He's here illegally. We have a United States senator and a bunch of knuckleheads in the House.
He wasn't here illegally.
That now say their main priority is bringing back someone.Maybe he's not a terrorist, but he's a potential terrorist. He's a terrorist watch list person.
What does that even mean? So am I, according to them. I mean, guys, we can't just let them fly with stuff like this. If you guys have been claiming he's a terrorist and a human trafficker, and now you're going, well, maybe we think so. Wow. Can you imagine? I mean, think about where we are right now, where now they're going, well, he looks like one for sure. Yeah, that sounds a hell of a lot like we've been hearing about the war on terror our entire lives. These are monsters, guys, all of them. They're using you. Stop falling for it.
They want to bring him back. You saw the El Salvadorian president. He laughed. He said, why in the hell would I bring back a potential terrorist?
No. See, now you stumbled across your own game right there. He said terrorist because that's what you guys said. And what he said is, well, I'm supposed to smuggle a terrorist in? Well, the only thing that makes that sound crazy is that you guys keep pretending he's a terrorist. You literally just let the cat out of the bag by making sure we knew that you're assuming that or lying about it. To put someone in prison for the rest of their life, it doesn't deserve it because, freedom and democracy.
Back to the United States when his home country is El Salvador.
God. This person says in response to that, none of that matters. He was illegally here. See how that works? Round and round we go. It never ends, guys. And Raymond says, does due process and the Constitution not matter in this country anymore? And he says, he entered the country illegally. What due process is he afforded? Yeah, all of it, by the way. You uninformed idiot. I shouldn't say that. I'm frustrated. He never claimed he entered. It doesn't matter. Everyone gets due process. But see, we're battling against people that are truly deceptively misinformed. Like they're being lied to by the Johnsons and by everybody else out there. They're misleading people in the most alarming ways when it matters the most. Here he is. Speaking of Mr. Johnson. Holy smokes, he says, Caroline Leavitt decimates the left for protecting a criminal alien terrorist. Yeah, all the things that we know aren't true. Over, guess what? Rachel Morin, person who was killed. That has literally nothing to do with Garcia at all. But you see what they're doing is now because people are beginning to see the game, what they're now just getting emotional conflation. Here, an alien over here killed this woman. How dare you fight for this guy's rights who isn't illegally here, who wasn't a criminal, and who's now been sent up? I mean, really? Is that the best you can do? To say that we should just list off things that have happened by illegal aliens? Okay, fine. What does that have to do with whether Garcia is being lied about or not? They're just trying to get you to be outraged and pretend like protecting the person's rights here is you protecting other bad people. It's not true. It's the same as pretending that if they send me to a foreign prison, that you support Hamas. See how that works? No, I just support the person that you're trying to lie about, or a Palestinian protester who you call a terrorist. No, pretty sure they just support Palestine. But you see how this works? You get people that who are afraid to stand up because they don't want to also be called a terrorist. Well, some of us aren't afraid to stand up.
Democrat and media outrage over the deportation of Abrego Garcia.
No, it's not just Democrat media, but see, that's the best they can do. They need you to think it's a partisan game. I'm of the mind that most people are very well aware of this. That's not just, I'm not just saying that. I don't say it about every topic. There's very clear continuous games going on here where I think from COVID to this, it's been gradually increasing. I think we're at a point right now where most people are not buying this. The best they can do is to try to get you outraged about the other side because that's their bread and butter. You think there's just lefties and media calling this out? You're insane if you think that.
An MS-13 El Salvadorian illegal alien criminal.
Nope, all lies.
Who was hiding in Maryland has been nothing.
Hiding in Maryland. No, he was publicly living in Maryland, had a job, had a family, 14 years. You see, just small lies like that, guys. If they believed what they were doing was right, why would they need to lie like that? Hiding in Maryland? You're not hiding when you're literally publicly living with a family and working. That's them trying to water this down and act like he was some secret alien hiding in this country when he was a functioning member of the society paying taxes and married to an American citizen. That is because they need you to be on their side because I think they're losing control.
Nothing short of despicable. Based on the sensationalism of many of the people in this room, you would think we deported a candidate for Father of the Year.
Yeah, that's like the 17th time they've repeated that exact talking point. What does that even mean? Where's that even coming from? Because they're trying to make it personal about families and children, and you're a terrorist, and they're just trying to get people emotionally outraged. That's it. That's the best they can do. You know how easy it would be for them to go, here's the evidence. Like they just tried to pretend they did. Like when they released the Epstein fake information or the JFK manipulation, and they go, we did it, right? And they wait to see if you fall for it. And we all went, nope, that didn't do it. And they go, oh, wait, truckload, I just found. It's the same game. They dump out the old 2019 information we've all talked about and hoping that liars like Benny Johnson can get you to jump at it, but it's not working.
That's because, unfortunately, many in this country care more about this quote-unquote Maryland father, a legal alien MS-13 gang member, than a Maryland mother.
Okay, you see how that works? So what she's saying we care more about is a person whose rights are being violated. The rest is nonsense, or rather irrelevant. It could be an American citizen, an illegal immigrant, a green card holder, a Visa card holder. You are allowing them to violate that person's rights. Whatever the narrative follows, you don't care about the Constitution. So the best she can do is to go, you care more about this person's rights being violated than you do about a completely unconnected story about a woman being murdered over here by a different person. That's what she's about to do.
Than a Maryland mother and an American citizen who was brutally murdered at the hands of a different illegal alien.
What does that have to do with anything? What the suggestion is that if you allow people who are here to not be randomly deported with no due process, that you're okay with her being killed? I mean, that should insult the hell out of you. That's bastardizing her memory for their political outcome. That's disgusting. Talk about despicable. That's what they are.
Of course, I am referring to Rachel Morin. And if you didn't see yesterday, a Maryland jury found illegal alien Victor Antonio Martinez Hernandez guilty of murdering Rachel Morin in August of 2023.
Still waiting for the connection here. What's the argument here? The guy wasn't here illegally in the first place, so literally nothing connects with what you're trying to say here. You're trying to scare people into believing whatever you claim because outrage story, which, by the way, is horrifying, and nobody should be okay with that. But the crimes are, the point is, guys, you're conflating things that have no connection. There's nothing to do with Garcia that has anything to do with this. They need you to believe that he's capable of what they did to her. That's what they're trying to do. It's lazy, and dumb people fall for it.
She was a 37-year-old mother of 5 who was jogging in an otherwise safe community northeast of Baltimore when this monster ambushed, strangled, and beat her to death before stuffing her brutalized body in a tunnel drain.
See what I'm talking about?
The Morin family finally got justice yesterday, but they will never get Rachel back. Our hearts go out to Rachel's family, her 5 children, and her mother, Patty, who has suffered the unimaginable loss of her daughter.
You're disgusting. The worst of the worst. And whether she wants to be or not, you're part of it. You are literally the face representing the worst thing we're talking about right now. You are disgusting. How dare you use her name to downplay something, to hide your criminal activity behind an outrage story? Not the fact that it happened, that we shouldn't care about it, but the story you're using to outrage people to hide your criminal activity. And on top of that, you're trying to take someone innocent and put them in this position in the context of what you're claiming, whether they're innocent of other past crimes that you want to make up in your mind or that exist that you haven't proven, to just put this person behind bars and using somebody else's tragedy to do so. Just, God, kills me. These people are disgusting, and they're everywhere right now. Speaking of that, holy smokes, he decimates the left for protecting a not criminal alien, not MS-13, not terrorist, because of Rachel Morin. And see, if you look at the comments, guys, look, there's a lot of people that are following him that are Republicans who are doing things like this. Pam Bondi, the inaction figure, no talk, no cuffs. They're all going, guys, where are all the arrests you promised? That's what most people seem to be saying right now. Even if they agree with what's happening here, they're like, okay, fine, where are the arrests? You're only going after Tesla people that are, in that case, I haven't even seen any real follow through on that. But anyway, another conversation. There's really no action being done. Oh, but here's Jack Posobiec jumping in to do the same thing. Same day, by the way, because there's totally not coordination at all. He says, I almost laughed when I saw this. Talk about clumsy, or just maybe they're just this stupid. Did Rachel Morin get due process? Did Lake and Riley get due process? Both of which were murdered. No one ever asked that. Wait, okay, let me walk you through this, Jack. How exactly are people who were murdered supposed to get due process? Talk about the dumbest argument of the day. Like you broke the internet with your stupidity. Or really, it's just trying to use this to get people mad. You know what it's trying to do is conflate the idea that people being murdered by illegal aliens suggest that you shouldn't care about due process. How do you even connect those two things? It's insane. But here comes one of his follower idiots going, this frickin' illegals are not eligible for due. Yeah, they are, though. Yep, they are. Yep, they are for due process, like everybody else. They're not eligible for due process. Well, martial law says, yes, they do, and post the reality that, yep, they do. And this person goes, just cites an image from Cat Turd. Says, sob stories about illegal gang members don't move me one bit. Has no business here in the USA. Again, and this is citing somebody else. I will not stop fighting until I see my husband alive. Oh, this regard to the wife and getting his husband back. Sob stories about illegal gang members. So not illegal, not a gang member. But who cares? Because Cat Turd's not in this for the truth. How you can argue that due process wasn't given to people that are murdered? I mean, it is gross. I just can't stop saying these are the worst people that I see every day. Disgusting. The kind of people that use the worst of suffering to make other people suffer while claiming they're saving people. The villains out there. And JD says the entire American media on the left, see, the same way. They're all framing the same way. The entire media in the left-wing industrial complex have decided the most important issue today is that a Trump had been deported an MS-13 gang member. Nope. What we care about is that you're violating the Constitution, that you don't seem to care about, Vance, which doesn't surprise me at all. But James simply says, once again, if this guy had just been deported, which is what they want you to think just happened, this would not be a story. The reason it's important is that Trump sent this guy to prison for life, even though he was never even arrested for anything, let alone convicted. 14 years he was in the United States. See, they could have just gone through the normal process, but then they would have had to prove information. Same point. Bondi saying, not a Maryland man, an illegal alien, lie, 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 over and over and over. And this person says, you're lying. He was granted withholding of removal. We can read the court documents. He has 0 criminal charges. He was sent to die in a prison without due process. Take off your cross, you shameful hypocrite. Okay, that's the right framing to get the term. When they allowed him to stay here because of risk of political persecution, the withholding of removal, that was what gave him the legal right to be here. It's very simple. We went over this the first time we talked about this. And here, this is what I was going to show you earlier. And this is Salty Texan, 61,000, saying, he's a violent illegal alien thug who beats his wife. Right, because Mr. Andy No has never been caught misrepresenting documents before or flat out lying, right? Now, look, I'm not even, to me, this is wildly irrelevant. This is a document where it says domestic violence, whatever that means. You realize how many people in this country, how many people that are on the Republican side of this conversation who are screaming about this evil terrorist who have been accused or charged with domestic violence? Does that then make them a terrorist? Does that mean their due process rights don't matter? Like, what are we even arguing here? That because he has domestic violence and some background charge from his wife, that we suddenly don't care about his due process rights? Or that he should be sent to prison to life somehow makes that okay? I just don't understand where we are anymore. And if this is what most people think, and I can't fall into that. I can't believe that. It's insane. But that's the reason that's being pushed forward is because of the Republican screamers and the idiots like Posobiec and the cat turds out there who are shoving in their face what the government handed to them while pretending to fight the deep state, which is the lies we keep showing you over and over and over. But now that we're like, well, he may not be a terrorist, but now you're getting all the side narratives. Well, but look, he's not father of the year. Look, he beat his wife. Look over here. He's got tattoos on his hands. He must be everything we're claiming without evidence, right? Certainly could be. You know how you can prove that? Evidence and due process. Pretty simple, right? Well, here's what we're getting. Right Angle News Network, another one of these new Republican, 200,000 followers already. That's how this that's the Musk Twitter XAI system works. Breaking, it says, his MS-13 tattoos. You see how lazy this reporting it is? Guys, nobody has proven these. Look, my point is the same. For all we know, he is a member of the gang. But it matters to me that we prove these things and don't start, now that they have been backed into a corner to where the evidence they keep trying to scream at you has been shown to be not what they claim it is. Well, now you're getting stuff like this. This is from today saying, well, he's got things on his fingers that we argue like in a very QAnon sense. And look, what they write out, it could make sense. I don't know if that's the case. For all we know, it could mean something else. Seeing as how we've got people in prison with autistic flag tattoos or people that have mom and dad tattoos who are not gang members, we've proven that, who are in El Salvador, maybe we should start asking how flimsy this has become. But it says his MS-13 tattoos were caught on camera during his meeting with Chris Van Hollen. Visible were a marijuana leaf representing an M, a symbol resembling either a skull or a smiley face for S. That seems a little bit ambiguous. And the number 13. Okay, how about this? How about he's got those tattoos because he wanted to be part of the gang? Does that make him a gang member? No, it doesn't. Or how about he got them because he has a friend that's in the gang? My point is, we can't keep assuming whatever makes the government narrative make sense. Even if he is a gang member, he needs to be proven to be that. That's due process. That's the only thing I've ever argued. I don't think anybody honest is over here trying to make the case that we know this person has no skeletons in his closet. Everybody does. My point is, whatever the claims, they need to be proven in court because that's the Constitution. It's amazing how the constitutionalists are arguing against that. But this person goes, it gets even better, and shows this image. Well, to me, that looks like a pineapple. But we're all assuming here, right? So let's just assume into whatever makes sense for my narrative, right? Or what looks like a smiley. And then over here, I mean, you tell me. Does that look like a 13? Can you even read that? I mean, my point is, neither can anybody else. Everybody is looking into whatever they want it to be. And you know why? Because Donald Trump made it a thing. That's where we are. Now, here's a better picture of it. Okay. So give me the 13 and all that. The skull is now 3 and the smiley face is an S. How does that work? I mean, you could make these things into anything, just like QAnon can make it whatever they want it to be. How about the point is that you're required to prove this if that's the case? Not you took a picture of his tattoos back in 2019 and then tried to make the case and it didn't stick and there was no allegation, he was released, and now you just wrap it back around. You realize that this wouldn't be Trump doing this right now? I mean, but this is posted by Trump, just so you know. Why would he do that if it's already a slam dunk? They're flailing. This is not present. That would not hold up in court is the point. But here's Cat Turd saying, anyone on Twitter telling you this is a winning strategy for Democrats should be mocked. Who is talking about Democrats? You children are lost in this left-right paradigm. People are talking about this are not going, Democrats are right, your Republicans are right. We're saying you're violating the Constitution, whoever supports it. Look around. These people are being laughed at by their own supporters in a lot of cases. Look underneath. It says it only plays well to their psycho far left base. It's the best they can do, guys. That's it. And he cites the same thing. So despite the court documents that you all got caught lying about, despite the evidence that you claim was there that doesn't exist, despite the claims of things that aren't even on the table right now, the best you can do is point to some fuzzy pictures of his knuckles Right. And this was 12 hours ago. The point is, Donald Trump posted this today. So recognize that they did this first, and Donald Trump follows up. Doesn't that seem a bit strange to you? He says, this is the hand of the man the Democrats should feel should be brought back to the United States because he's such a fine and innocent person. I mean, I just am absolutely, completely floored that what we're dealing with is the president of the United States showing you a picture of his knuckle tattoos and without anything else other than floated claims and saying that is enough to send a person to a foreign prison for the rest of his life. I mean, are we actually even arguing that being a part of that gang is enough to send you to a foreign prison for the rest of your life? Where are we? I just want people to stay. I want to see some more momentum out there of people that I know are there, that are in the partisanship, that are not complete blind morons, that recognize that even if he's part of the gang, this is still a major problem because no due process was given regardless, which is the only real point. What we're doing here is trying to dive into to show you that they're even lying on top of that. For what reason? Even if you want to believe he is, even if he is a gang member, they still are using that to undermine the Constitution like they're doing with everything else. Kills me. But look for yourself, right? If that's the case and you want to make these allegations that he's part of this gang, just like everything else, it needs to be proven, especially for somebody who's married to a U.S. woman for 14 years in this country with a family who has no criminal record. And the only thing you have is the allegations from a cop who was disgraced that was turned out to be false, even according to Grok. Aaron points this out. Here's the clip of them shouting about evidence when people ask, and the evidence is that we have evidence. Not a joke. We've already played it for you. They're going, where's the evidence? And she says, the evidence is what we've shown you, and we have the evidence. Great. Thanks, Bondi. Real well put. They've called him a human trafficker, a violent criminal, a convicted gang member. They've refused to give a single piece of evidence, but the best they could do is Trump holding an image now. Bondi even suggested all they have is the gang worksheet from 2019. But here's what you get, because this shows that they're not desperate, right? New York Times says senator meets with wrongly deported Maryland man. They admitted he was wrongly deported, guys. And of course, the White House really kind of reactionary memeing these days, trying to pretend like they're in the inside. They do the same thing people have been doing about their dumb reports. And he crosses it out and says, and they read it as senator meets with deported MS-13 illegal alien in El Salvador who's never coming back. That's what the White House wrote. Knowing they're lying, knowing that they're wrong, knowing that what they did violated the Constitution, and they're going to make fun of you for it because Chris is a Democrat, therefore Democrat's bad, therefore we can just make fun of him. Well, as Aaron says, the White House press shop lies and claims Abrego was not wrongfully deported, despite having acknowledged that fact at every single stage of the process. That's where we are. Why would they lie about that if they've said it publicly and they've done it in court and everyone's written about it? Because I think they're trying to confuse people. I think we are doing something much more damaging than just them trying to achieve a political end. You know what I think. It's much bigger than that. Well, we're already past 3.5. They just wanted to quickly, what was I going to get to here? Some extra cases we'll go over possibly tomorrow. So I'm not even going to get into what you said. I said in the beginning, Chris Van Hollen going there felt very political to me. Now, either way, I'm glad it's happening because it's getting more attention on it. He's there. You can see we got to find out he wasn't dead. But I still think it's problematic because people on the right are acting like because he's there, therefore we know it's not, it's a Democrat. And it's just lazy, the thinking in all of this. But he says we're coming up on a month. Not a single person sent to CCOT has been able to have a phone call. So he says, I'm boarding his flight to go to there to see him, is what this was about. Then it says he's in El Salvador, fighting for the return, he says, and Trump admin can lie all they want, but the court said they failed to show that he was part of MS-13. They did. We already showed you that. So them pointing to his finger knuckle tattoos is just a desperate effort to try to make you feel that still. The point is not whether we know for sure that he's not, which I think the evidence already shows that there is no same claim. The evidence is not there. He denies it. His family denies it. His lawyer denies it. The evidence does not back it up. The best they have is the insinuation. Like I keep saying, though, for all we know, there's more that we don't see. The point is, as always, that they have yet to prove that, which is all that matters. The game where they get you subjectively going along with what they want you to think because, well, look at him. How are you that dumb? How are you that willing to allow the government to use your personal opinion to drive their agenda? The point is, they have not shown that. Whether Van Hollen says it or not doesn't change the reality, is the point. But here it says they were denied entry at CCOT, which, that doesn't seem that crazy to me. It's a foreign leader or, a congressman going to a foreign prison. So to me, it felt pretty politicized in its own right. I don't understand why he thinks he would have access to that, even though the point is that this is the Trump administration's responsibility to rectify it. But he got to sit down with him. And he says, my main goal of the trip was to meet him. Tonight, I had that chance. So why'd they let him do it? Right? I mean, with all the talk, why did they decide to let him do it? I think it was for a very clear political reason. Now, whether Van Hollen knows that or not, I think I'll show you next what ended up happening. I think it was what they meant to do. But he said, called his wife to pass along the message. So here they are. Here's the table. So here's another shot. Here's Bukele saying, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, miraculously risen from the death camps and torture. So here's what's funny. He's trying to downplay, act like you're hyping these dangerous prisons for something they're not, despite the fact that he's the one that has floated those ideas as what they are. He's praised what he's done to these places. You see how insane this is? So he's the one in every other context that's been, look at what I turned them into. I'm arresting people, scooping up anybody with a tattoo, putting them in prison forever because bad guys are going in prison and crime is down. Like just being an authoritarian and then laughing about how bad the prisons are, talking with Israelis about what they're doing to prisoners. And then when he comes back, he downplays that by acting like that's a Democrat thing because he's playing into the same political fervor. They know what they're doing. It's like him acting like, oopsie, we got him. Now I'm coming back. And what can I do? It's not within my power. Like they are playing and laughing at all of you. Well, they're the ones that are looking stupid. But right now, him downplaying death camp and torture is him downplaying what he said these places were. But he goes, now sipping margaritas with Van Hollen in tropical paradise of El Salvador. And then shows an image of what appeared to be drinks. Which everyone's talking about. Oh, look, they've got 2 margaritas in front of them. He can't be suffering that bad. Which, by the way, even if they were just genuinely drinking margaritas, the guy that was plucked out of a concentration camp prison that they've all praised as being exactly like that, to sit down to talk to somebody is not in any indication that it's not bad in the prison. That's like saying that guy, that alien murdered that woman, therefore he's a bad guy. It's lazy. That doesn't change the fact of what he's dealing with. But here's the craziest part. This is why I think this is deliberate and why Bukele posted that on purpose with the image of the margarita. They're very lazy. They're very clumsy what they do. It came out from the New York Times. You can read it for yourself. Mr. Bukele in his social media post even crowed that Kilmar was miraculously riven from the death torture camps, was now sipping margaritas. But according to a person familiar with the situation, hey, Bukele aide placed the 2 glasses with cherries, salted the rims in front of the table in front of Mr. Van Hollen and Abrego in the middle of their meeting in an attempt to stage the photo. So people that were in the room saw this. Why would you do that? Because you are in an effort of a political framing. You're trying to get favor because you know you're losing. I just think this is insane. It's obvious what's happening right in front of us. Now, Trump officials could face criminal contempt over over the ongoing deportations. That's up in the air right now. As I understand it, they've got about a week. I think it was right here. Yeah. So basically, this is the court. See, as always, guys, we will give you the documents. You can read it for yourself. We may go forward with this more as it develops. But Aaron's highlighting this. This is the court ruling that they might conclude that they find them in criminal contempt. Criminal contempt is interesting, different than civil. Now, I'm going to wait to go into it more in depth to see what happens. Because right now, that's where we are. Where it's saying U.S. federal judge has given Trump officials 1 week deadline to comply with his orders or risk being found in contempt of court, potentially setting up a historic clash between the 2 equally powerful branches of government, which is where we're going with this. And if they just keep standing their ground, guys, this could be the end of, or always has been, maybe showing us the new end of what we ever thought we were. And again, that is not hyperbolic, guys. This is a big deal. Judge James Boasberg said the most obvious way for the officials to avoid contempt was to assert custody over a group of more than 200 people who they deported to El Salvador without due process. All I was saying is rectify the problem, and it goes away. That they won't because they know they'll then be forced to prove that they don't have evidence. which would make them this would make it an even worse problem for them. So they are just taking the consequences, even if it destroys the country, because they don't want to prove that they were wrong. That's what I think. The White House denies any wrongdoing and has depicted the group as terrorists and criminals, even though we know that's not true in most cases. It says there, and that's even according to their own information, that only 32 of them even have serious crimes in general. There is also a possibility of Trump administration officials being found in criminal contempt, for which the punishment would include jail time. Problem, though, is that even Trump has the power to pardon criminal offense, right? So, but the president does not have the power to issue pardons for civil liability. So the argument is it will much more likely be civil contempt, because then this is the problem with the way the system is, and they know that. This is the whole Andreessen, Karp, Thiel kind of mindset, is just lie, challenge the judges, and move forward. They've made this case before. They're doing it around the world. We're watching a coup take place in a very weird way, but I think we see it. Now, we're going to go over more of this. Aaron has one last point on this, actually. This is about the law, or he says basically the most important aspect of this that no one's talking about in the public debate. It is outright illegal to pay a third country to imprison people in any context. It is. And on top of that, what's interesting is when it comes down to the financial aspect of this, when they're saying, this was brought up in our conversation, that, well, just stop paying them. And they're like, well, that's for Congress to decide. It's like, oh, okay, now the one time, now it's Congress's decision, even though we don't care what they say anywhere else. They're playing everybody. They really are. Now, the last couple examples here is that this Ozturk, they're now declaring her a dangerous flight risk. No criminal record, here legally, PhD student. No reason to argue that other than she doesn't like Israel. Rather, she called out their genocide in a very formal and logical way. No racism, no claims to anything crazy. Wrote an op-ed with multiple people about how they're committing genocide. Very simple. And of course, that's why she was targeted by Israel, that the U.S. government happily obliged, scooped her up with no warrant, no identification. That should outrage everybody by itself, but there's 100 examples of this now, and all these Republicans are screaming about why it makes sense. You're destroying this country. Not because of the left or the right, because of your government. Her crime, writing an op-ed. But they're declaring her a flight risk, so they don't have to let her out, because this is going to be, it's going to get worse for them. Look, guys, they know what they're doing, to the point to where they're hiding is every way they can, having any more evidence come out about what they're doing. The barber that was arrested, all of these people were not given due process. All of them have been proven to not be what they claim. This whole thread, we'll go over it more. As it says right here, neither Andre, Nira, or Taro, any of them who were sent to El Salvador got due process. No judge ruled they were part of a gang. No jury convicted them as criminal charges. They weren't even told what was happening to them. Think about that. 2025, and they're picked up off the street when they're living in this country, many of them legally, some of them seeking asylum or citizenship. They weren't even told what happened to them, guys. How is that anything you think represents this country? Well, because you pretend they were all breaking the law, even though most of them weren't. I'll skip all of that. Yeah, just other examples of the same thing. Here's an example of what they're doing with a Guatemalan immigrant. No criminal record, who was there in regard to this process, waiting inside the car for their lawyer. And this is what they did. Dragged him out of the car. And you realize, guys, this is not violent criminals. They have no criminal record. They're simply immigrants that are trying, and this is how you go about this. Is the war on terror for dissidents. Not to say that's what's happening here. What I'm saying is that the way they're dealing with this, the war on terror, the war of terror, allowed them to start using wild authority in very violent ways for small. It's like stop and frisk or whatever else we're talking about. It is a rapid violation under a guise that you may be okay with in the moment. It's what your government does every day of its life. Now they're doing it right now, right in front of you. Here's another example of somebody they arrested, and this is an Israeli speaking up for one of them, saying he was part of a peace group, bridge building between this, working with Israelis and Palestinians. They arrested him and deported him under the guise that he was a criminal, terrorist. And all Bunama says is you shouldn't have to have the endorsement of Israelis in order to have afforded basic rights. Trump administration is eminently planning on deporting an 18-year-old with a pending asylum claim. As always, he has an asylum claim. That's here legally. He's trying to seek the legal process, whether asylum or citizenship, and they don't care. They're violating U.S. law. and not giving them due process. And why, guys? This is the important one. Claiming that he's part of Tren de Aragua. Why? Because he has a picture on Facebook with a friend holding a water pistol that ICE thought was a gun. It's in the documents. This is where we are. I'm going to end with this clip that I think is very relevant, shared by True Stream Media. I've played it before, I think. It's from Mr. Robot. But, the point here, guys, is just to speak out. Have the courage to actually say what you're thinking, not just to have these thoughts about how wrong this is and how bad it is, but just keep it internally because you don't want to be called, anti-American or a Democrat or Republican or whatever else. There's never been a more important time, ever in my mind, to stand up for what you know is right, no matter what it challenges, no matter who it challenges. Because right now, a lot of us, like this clip is going to end with, we have this internal dialogue. We've got the fear, we recognize it, but we find one reason or another to just say nothing. Say nothing, no problem. I'm okay. And move on. The sad reality is you're not okay. Things are happening and you see it. And we need to do something, or every single moment this goes forward, we are going to lose one more piece of what we're fighting for. What are we doing here if we're not trying to save, of all things, the constitutional reality of this country? Please, I plead with you. Take the time to look into these claims, stand up for what you know this country. The foundational elements of everything this country is. Look, I've got plenty of criticisms about the state of society in general. Regardless, as I've said many times, you can see the foundational importance for what this is, what the Constitution is right now, and what they're doing and how this changes immediately the reality of your life. You just can't stress it enough. Stand up. Find the courage to speak out. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant. Sorry. It's dumb StreamYard settings. Hold on. Or just dumb me. I don't know. I can't figure it out.
What is it about society that disappoints you so much?
Oh, I don't know. Is it that we collectively thought Steve Jobs was a great man, even when we knew he made billions off the backs of children? Or maybe it's that it feels like all our heroes are counterfeit. The world itself's just one big hoax. Spamming each other with our running commentary of bullshit masquerading as insight. Our social media faking as intimacy. Or is it that we voted for this? Not with our rigged elections, but with our things, our property, our money. I'm not saying anything new. We all know why we do this, not because Hunger Games books makes us happy, but because we want to be sedated. Because it's painful not to pretend. Because we're cowards. Fuck society.
Elliot, you're not saying anything. What's wrong?
Nothing.